Hi, everybody. Ronnie, should we go into all the reasons why that is much better than any Led Zeppelin song? All the reasons?
Not sure. Sorry.
First of all, you just don't get, you don't get the same urgency. And I mean, the Stones are so much in the moment. You know, when that song was recorded, or that song was recorded after, there were two major events in 1969. I mean, a lot of major events, but two musical events. One was, of course, Woodstock, which you know, but the other one was Altamont. Did Professor Kramer talk about Altamont? Altamont was held at the Altamont Motor Speedway. There's a movie called Gimme Shelter, I think, which talks about how the Stones found this venue. And it was, the whole thing from the very beginning was a mess. And they didn't have security, so they put Hell's Angels in charge. And the Grateful Dead you see them landing in a helicopter because they were supposed to play. And Jerry Garcia says to the rest of them, we're getting out of here because there's already a very, very, very bad vibe there. And the short story is that somebody got killed at the concert while it was happening, right? So while Woodstock was the celebration of '69, that was the beginning of the summer. At the end of the summer, which people don't talk about, was Altamont. So the Stones made the song about that, Gimme Shelter, which is really, if you're an American, it's a great song for today also, right? And you see also in the Stones, I have to make a confession, I probably have listened to that song, I don't know, 2,000 times, probably. And I never knew the lyrics until I saw the thing on, the screen on the YouTube. I just never listened to I'm like, Professor Kramer pays attention to lyrics. I don't really pay that much attention to lyrics. But even in that song, you see like the what's happening, that sense of catastrophe in the 60s, right? Or what's happening, the end of the 60s. Also in 1968 in Chicago, there was the Democratic Convention and the Chicago cops like totally cracked down on a protest. I'm giving a very, very short version of it, but you can see why that song resonates today, right? If you're an American. Anyway, okay, what's this class about?
How does it compare?
Pardon? I was too young, and I was young. I was 8 in '68, so
yeah.
So I don't know.
I'll ask my parents.
Yeah, you gotta ask your parents. And I got the tail end of the 60s, which in the suburbs was just, disco and the Brady Bunch, whatever. It was nothing exciting. It was not exciting. Ilana, you're reminiscing, I can tell.
Yes, I was 13 in 68. Yes, I was out demonstrating, cutting classes and demonstrating in the park against the war in Vietnam.
Well, how come you're not cutting class now?
There's no demonstration, but I was out demonstrating. When was it? Yet last week on Saturday against occupation. So I was still doing it.
You're still doing it.
Still doing it 50 years later.
Where were you in 68, in 69?
In 68 and 69, I lived in Brooklyn. And I was going to school in Manhattan, Hunter College High School, and I was going out to the park all the time for demonstrations.
Right.
And great music. Saw Peter, Paul, and Mary in the park and a whole bunch of other people. But also, I meant it. And so, at the age of, I was also campaigning for Senator O'Dwyer against Javits, who was the legendary Jewish Republican, and I felt so revolutionary, so rebellious that I was campaigning for the Irish guy against Javits.
I see. So that's a little inside baseball, but I think we still get it. Also in 68 and 69, the students at Columbia occupied the administration buildings, right? There was, Columbia did not handle it well. It was tied up in race relations also with the neighborhood basically, and Columbia didn't really recover for 10 or 15 years until after that. I went to Columbia in '79 and it had not recovered. Right now, if you want to go to Columbia, is probably the hardest school in the country to get into, right? Yeah. Right. It was not when I was in '79 because it still had that it was still hard to get into, but it was not you know, in that top percentile kind of thing.
By the
Because-
time my dad was going to college in the
Yeah.
late 80s, early 90s, it was already much harder to get in.
Oh, for sure. So we can all be thankful.
My mother was
Yeah.
going to Columbia. My mother was going to Columbia at that time, 68, 69.
Wow. Okay, so she knows, right? She knows it was a crazy time.
What
Yeah,
is
if I
the occupation of administration building?
you'll Google it. You know, it's a sugya, right? It's a partial. We
There
should,
were demonstrations all over on the campuses, especially against ROTC, which was officer training programs.
right. All
And
right.
sit-ins and so on. Okay.
How is that affected? I mean, I have so many more stories to tell, but how is that affect what's going on in America? Has it affected what's happening here? Do you feel like, I mean, for me, I'm just so connected to America because my family's still there, my brother, my sister, my dad is still there, whatever. And I'm still American, so I connect a lot with what's going on there. So
I
for
think
me,
it comes here on July 1st.
what does that mean? What's
Is this
happening?
annexation really going to happen?
Oh, okay. So those things are over. Those things are those things being put together? Protests against annexation and Black Lives Matter in America?
Wait, what is
I'm almost sure of it.
That everything gets conflated into each other.
Yeah.
All protests are about everything, even if they started out about a policeman killing a man.
We're not going to get into the politics, but yeah, it's interesting how they all conflate. Everything is now just, there is this, it is a time, maybe that's the way it was like in the 60s. It was just a time of protest.
Intersectionality, right? I think that's what it's called.
Intersectionality.
Oh,
Yeah.
intersection, no, that's also something, I mean, right. So intersectionality is how would you describe it?
Feminist?
a buzzword?
It's
Feminist? Just feminist?
everything.
No, I mean, it's everything. but-
Feminism is Black Lives Matter, is LGBT rights, is
It's
I don't
mushing
know.
all these issues together so you
It's
can't have a complex
everything.
opinion.
Identity
There's no-
politics.
Yeah, it all means the same thing in the fight for rights, I guess.
Time of protest.
Yeah.
Will we get the music though? That's the question. Right. What was the? I'm sorry. I don't mean to trivialize things, but what were the best band? What were the best protest? What are the best bands that came out of that time? Best songs, best albums. I just think of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. They wrote a song called Woodstock. I think they also wrote a song about Kent State, right? So they were like very much in it. I don't even think they're very good. I mean, they're great. I mean, they're great, but they're not the stuff.
Didn't Bob Dylan go electric?
Oh, Bob Dylan went electric, I think, a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
That'd be 65 or 67? 67 was the Royal Albert Hall stuff, right, Ben?
65 was the Newport festival or whatever.
Bringing It All Back Home is the first electric album.
Okay. But didn't he go, I think he went electric at a concert in I think in Rhode Island he did. But then there's the bootleg album, which is fantastic from the Royal Albert Hall.
It was Maggie's Farm, wasn't it?
I don't know, but
Maggie's Farm is on Bringing It All Back Home.
Yeah.
That's an incredible song. But in one of the intervals in the Royal Albert Hall concert, which is a bootleg album, somebody calls out from the audience, Judas, right? That Dylan had betrayed the folk cause by going electric, and he was compared to Judas Iscariot, right, for betraying them, right? Pretty amazing, right? Because Dylan was betraying the folk movement, was really indigenous, and I'm sure Ben, you took Professor Kramer's class.
No, I did not take it.
You just know about Dylan, right? So
Yeah.
before, when he became electric, he just changed his persona changed. I don't know if he changed, right?
Have you heard his latest? Murder
Sure.
Most Foul?
Great.
Really good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's
Yeah.
great. It's great. It's just as
But I prefer the I Contain Multitudes.
it's another new one, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. I play Beethoven sonatas, Chopin's prelude.
He probably.
I Contain
uh,
Multitudes.
right. Okay. How are you guys doing? Are you very tired? Is it a very tired time of the day? Got a very long. I feel like this is really the end of the semester, right?
Getting there.
Getting there, right? Dan and I were yesterday at a Bar Ilan open house thing that they do on Zoom. How would you describe it, Donna?
I guess it wasn't that good.
Yeah, it was
Sorry.
It was just really, really,
It
it was really
wasn't
unprofessional.
practical. Yeah, it wasn't practical though. So.
Yeah, it's just very disappointing. It was like it just reminds me of like they have those shows on Independence Day in Israel at Har Herzl, and the values of it are like from 1970, right? It looks like a 70 variety show or something. That's kind of the way the Bar Ilan thing was. Totally.
How do you have an
Exactly.
open house on Zoom?
What's that?
How do you have an open house on Zoom?
Like you have a class, same thing, right? People talk. I talked about the department. It's just designed to bore people, I think, and to make the university as uninteresting as possible. They showed up as saying we're in the top 2% of universities in the world. That's a lie, right? Why start with a lie, right? We have our strengths. We are not in the top 2% universities in the world. We might like to think we are, and by some metric, we must have mistakenly gotten there, but it's totally not true. Whatever. Whenever you start off lying, it's just like, everything you say is under suspicion. Okay, yeah. So I'm talking a lot about me. Anybody else want to share anything from this week?
Fake news, huh?
Never stops.
Never stops. Wow, yeah.
Never stops.
Right. Does ethos...
That wasn't the low.
What's that? What?
No, I just said that wasn't the worst part, so the fake news.
It went from bad to worse.
Right. Yeah. Right, the real news is even worse.
I've been hiding under a rock. I cannot take it.
Right, so you guys have studied American literature, many of you. I think I said this to you last week, my children in their youthful naivety think that America is such an incredibly great place. And we did mention this, that, whatever's happening now it's not new. It's based upon decades or centuries of problems, and it's coming to a head. I'm just wondering, from reading American literature, do you have an interesting take on what's happening now?
I mean, it just ties into we never do anything new. We just repeat old patterns of history thing. It's so apparent. We just never learn from anything. We just keep on doing what we did,
You're saying we as humans, or we as Americans?
As humans.
As humans, right. I'm wondering just about from studying 19th century literature with Kramer or Schulach. Is there, I'm just asking, is there like the specificity of feeling it as we as Americans? Like how does this fit in the American story?
I feel like it is the American story. This has been going on for like hundreds, I don't want to say hundreds, but 50s of years. It's not a new concept that there's many problems in the United States involving race and discrimination, that this is just another chapter in the same book.
I think this is more aimed at the president, though, than before.
Right. If the reason they're out demonstrating in numbers in London is not just Black Lives Matter, it's We Hate Trump, right? It's definitely that as well. But no. So, were any of the works that you read in American literature? Did any of those? Do you read literature of the disenfranchised? Is there meaning? Is it just Whitman and is it all white males, or do you read minority voices?
I read Frederick Douglass.
Okay.
Minority.
Well, sure, right.
We also read I can't remember who, but it was oh my God, I can't remember any words. It was a memoir by a Native American about her family's history on. So it's also like a similar.
Crazy Brave, I think, is that one.
Yes.
Right. Every nation idealizes its history and pushes things under the rug. Right.
I've been thinking about like Gore Vidal and like what do you call that, popular social history that he writes.
The Empire.
Well, I mean, I think we haven't really had a left in America since the New Deal, and now here we are ripe for a New Deal. So I think we're going through a process to maybe see like a rebirth of a real true left in America. I think the trappings of empire from the war were too much, and we've long been on this like two Americas, and I think there's a lot more than just the race issue with this, right? If the whole COVID pandemic wasn't happening, I don't think it would be to the scale that we're witnessing.
For sure. People, you know what? People are not working. Let's go to demonstration.
People are like pent up. They're just, no, I wouldn't say bored, but like they're just, there's a lot going on.
I think you're highly I don't want to get into the politics. One day, we can one day, Tom, but I think you're highly optimistic. I really, really do.
Gore Vidal identified as a conservative.
For sure, right. Very far right. It was Tom Wolfe and Gore Vidal, or Norman Mailer and Gore Vidal. They hated each other, right?
But like his genre of writing, wasn't it this like popular history, this other unofficial?
I mean, he wasn't right wing, but he was, because he only believed that the United States had two options, conservative and reactionary, he identified as conservative.
Okay, so we're getting very inside baseball now.
Far from Milton.
Right. I don't mind, but just Gore Vidal takes a long time to explain to everybody else. How did we get here?
Trying to segue.
How did we get to Gore Vidal? Oh, we were talking about like
That's all.
We're talking about protest and
American literature.
Like where we're headed.
American literature and Tom's optimism about a vibrant political future. Yes.
I didn't say it's not going to be bloody.
Okay, we're not going to go there.
By the way, last comment on Gore Vidal. My background right now is a film poster written by Gore Vidal.
So now we have to see it.
Suddenly last summer.
Okay.
Well, now it's gone.
It's gone because you have to stay there.
You can kind of.
So I'm glad we spent time on it because for Ben, this obviously is personal for you. Right. So where were we now?
Book 9.
Oh, okay, right. You
want to segue?
You can hear what my life consists of. You can hear my children and grandchildren in the other room. So I'm grateful for the adult company. Yes.
Are you in the same room? Your office?
I have a door. So that's good.
Oh, to briefly go back to books that from the American literature courses, Dr. Shulak had us read a book called Citizen. I don't know if every class did it, but when I took it, by Claudia Rankine, and it's fantastic, dealing with American racial stuff.
She's
to
African.
Be really articulate with the word stuff.
Is she African American, Claudia Rankine?
I think so.
Yes,
she might be mixed race.
Okay. Right. All these issues are really electric issues. They really, really are. In a way, it's hard to talk about them directly, because when you start talking about them directly, you start to get polemical. It's easier in a way if you kind of get them indirectly, right?
I think you were talking about 19th century literature, and I haven't taken the American course yet, but it immediately made me think of Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Mm-hmm. Okay, sure. So it is interesting also the way all these things that we're reading are part of the story, and we can extrapolate from, we started with the Rolling Stones, we can get from here to there, and to really see the ways in which either the story is repeating itself or whether this story makes sense, is coming as part of another story. And it all goes back to the story that really we've been telling as well in relationship to Milton and the Renaissance. It really, in many ways, many of the conflicts that exist. No, thank you. Many of anybody want pasta? I said to Mike last week, it's like if I were a doctor, would you come into my office while I was seeing a patient and say, do you want pasta? They don't really believe that I do any real work, actually. But the stories that we see today between individual rights and authority, I mean, they play themselves out, obviously, in many different kinds of ways, but the story really does begin in our period in the 17th century, and especially with Milton. So let us, even though there are so many interesting things to talk about, and which I really would like your perspective on, maybe during the break I'll ask you something. Let me just, sorry, I just lost you guys. Back to meeting, sorry. Let's do a screen share, and let's look at, back to meeting. Why can't I do this? What are you seeing now? Anything?
We see your background screen.
You see my background screen. Let's go for a stop share and a share screen and a this. Oh, I keep on clicking back to the same. Okay, that's what I want. Can you see the Rolling Stones now?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
Now we see Milton.
Now we see Milton. Good. Does anybody want to give us an entry point to think of where to start with this or how to introduce it?
One thing that was very obvious to me was that the language kind of changed. As soon as he starts it's like mostly, first of all, it's mostly dialogue, almost the whole chapter, but also it's so much simpler. It's so much more direct, I think. It was so much easier to understand. It seemed to me to be like almost a different book entirely.
That's really interesting. I told you that Dryden later on turned it into a play, but I never really thought about the way the language does change. And right, with Satan, we all we get is metaphors, but with Adam and Eve, somehow we get their straight language, a little bit like God in a way in book 3, right? We just get them straight. We get the language, the reported dialogue straight. Oh, excuse me.
I found it interesting the difference between the how do you say petha? The bit where he calls the muse, and the rest of the book where he talks about like the wrath of Achilles and Aeneas, and I just don't see that kind of furious impulsivity in book 9, and I wonder how Milton's perception of wrath is different.
Whoa. His furious impulsivity was nice. I appreciate that. I'm not really quite sure what you mean.
Well, he says that, give me a moment, let me find the line.
Oh, at the beginning, you're saying there's a kind of incongruity between the way he introduces it as an epic and then what you see. And remember that Milton says at the beginning of book 9 that he's leaving these older genres and he is going to write an epic, the better fortitude of patience and heroic martyrdom, unsung, right? So there Milton is announcing simultaneously his appropriation of those precedent traditions, Spenser, Virgil, Homer, right? Or he hasn't done Spenser yet. So far he's just done Virgil and Homer. And he says now of patience and heroic martyrdom unsung. This has never been sung before. Remember, he says the same thing in the invocation. Things yet on whatever, that line about Milton is writing a kind of poetry which nobody's ever tried before. Right, and then at the end, Milton says, after he goes through the Spenserian genre version of it, he says, "Me of these nor skilled nor studious, higher argument remains sufficient of itself to raise that name, unless in age too late, or climate, or years down my intended wing, depressed, and much they may, if all be mine, not hers, who brings it nightly to my ear." Well, I finally got those lines. So Milton is saying he's not skilled or studious enough so he's turning to higher argument. So I think Tikva's pointing to the incongruity between the epics that he's referring back to and the unheroic nature of the story between Adam and Eve. Wait. And let's just the last 4 lines. Unless an age too late or cold, and I spoke about this on the lecture, Milton's anxiety about not being able to write for various reasons. Maybe the climate of England is not appropriate for epic, right? He's maybe thinking of the Mediterranean, of Homer and Virgil, and that epics come out of the Mediterranean and not out of England. As I mentioned, the weather of England is associated with melancholy. So maybe there's something in the air. Right, quite literally, maybe there's something in the air that will prevent him from writing. Or years damp my intended, or maybe it was too old. Or years damp my intended wing depressed, and much they may, if all be mine, not hers, who brings it nightly to my ear. Meaning Milton's wings will be depressed, and much they may, if all be mine, if it's only coming from me, not hers, not from the muse, who brings it nightly to my ear. So here again, Milton is worried about being able to write the right kind of poem. And he will not be able to write the right kind of poem unless he is successfully visited by the muse. If it's all his, it won't be enough. It will be just him. One of the things that's remarkable about Milton is you see the kind of simultaneity of this incredible chutzpah that he's writing or rewriting this story, but also this unbelievable humility and the sense that he's going to fail at what he's doing, or maybe that he has failed in what he's doing. But that is interesting, typically, just to point out at the beginning, the way in which Milton is, as we've seen all along, and this is a model for a certain kind of literary reading, he's taking past readings, and he knows how to read them properly, and having read them properly, he makes them his own. That is, he takes the epic and he translates it into English. I mean that really literally. The epic is really a Roman and Greek genre. And Milton takes the epic and translates into English. He writes an epic in the tradition of Homer and Virgil. Ben, you just see Spencer is like Spencer's got to be a problem for Milton, because he's obviously very influenced by Spencer, but why does Milton succeed and Spencer not? Why does Milton write as if he's the first? He obviously loves Spencer. He's writing about him constantly. But how does he get away with that? I mean, I see how he gets away with saying he's first and primary in relationship to Homer and Virgil. He's writing a Christian epic. But Spencer also wrote a Christian epic. Just kind of, I've never thought of the question in that way, but it is an interesting question. But you guys are more interested in Adam and Eve and the love story, and I hear that. I think we get a part of Satan. Milton criticism is interesting because the people who celebrate Satan as the hero of the poem tend to deal with very specific passages in the poem, and they don't deal with the passages in which Satan doesn't come off so well. So before we get to Adam and Eve, which we will in a second, let's get into Satan's head again. How do we get from this description of Satan and his psyche or whatever to Adam and Eve? I mean, let's just situate the action. What's dramatically happening here? I mean, I know what happens eventually, but how do we get to the point where Eve is tempted by Satan?
Eve says to Adam, if we're going to be doing this tending to the garden thing,
right.
There's a lot of garden and there's only two of us, and maybe
right.
if we
right.
up,
So that's what
done.
Right. But even before that, I mean, I'm just like, what? How does good? That's the Adam and Eve part. How does Satan get there? I mean, he's been traveling for a while, right? And then and Milton just describes the way in which he becomes embodied in the snake. And so we watch that process. And here, just like in book 4, we see Satan watching Adam and Eve. It's the same thing here in book 9. I'll just read a little bit of this.
Comes in as kind of like a mist, right?
Right. Did you ever watch the very disappointing TV show called Lost?
I love every moment of the show, yes.
You loved every moment of it. I think that show was just constantly promising you that you would understand it, and you never did. And neither did they. What, Johnny?
It's good for the first 3 seasons.
I totally agree. Some of the stuff was just so amazing. Some of the early episodes were incredible.
Isn't that like Dora from Bewitched, the mother-in-law who appears in a...
Right at the end. Right. Yeah, so finally you read Paradise Lost and you see that's the black mist from Lost, right? That's the mist from Lost, right? See, it pays to watch television, people, right? That's what I always say. Right, so so he embodies himself. He becomes this mist. So let's read a little bit here.
Lost is a midrash of Paradise Lost.
You get extra credit for that, Ben. Well done. With what delight could I have walked thee round if I could joy in aught sweet interchange of hill and valley, rivers, woods, and plains, now land, now sea and shores with forests crowned, rocks, dens, and caves. But I in none of these find place or refuge. And the more I see pleasures about me, so much more I feel torment within me. So from the hateful siege of contraries, all good to me becomes bane, and in heaven much worse would be my state. Wow. If you were to, like, you know, put Satan on the couch here, what would your initial diagnosis be?
Angsty teenager.
What's that?
Angsty teenager.
An angsty teenager. Okay, I mean, no, we're getting some, I mean, maybe, but we're getting some psychic complexity here. I mean, I'm trying to understand the lines. But I in none of these find place or refuge. And the more I see pleasures about me, so much more I feel torment within me.
I mean, to me,
Let's just stop there.
Like, I don't belong anywhere, which is.
Anybody want to go with that? Maybe not.
It's depression, maybe, or maybe melancholy, to use the terms they would have used back then.
Right. I mean, melancholy. I mean, I like using our terms, even though it's an anachronism, just so we understand it better. So on the one hand, it's like Tikva saying it's like a Satan, the existentialist, outside of society, and Rinat is saying, well, that and what comes with that existential isolation, just despair. And the more I see pleasures about me, so much more I feel torment within me, as from the hateful siege of contraries. That's the part I really don't understand.
Cognitive dissonance, no?
Okay.
Isn't it more like a contrast? Every time you see something good, it makes it that much more obvious that there's something in him that doesn't fit and that it's off. Like how opposites.
Go ahead, Rinat. Yeah. I'm just I'm trying to imagine a person like that.
I forget what it's called, but it's a thing in art when you have like a black background, you make something white, and how you can see the contrast more clearly because of it. And so it seems that's what's going on is what's happening here is something like that.
I think also he's been created specifically for this role, to be, you know, the evil in the world. And I think also part of him is like, well, why couldn't I have that? I see all this happiness, and why was I created not to have this? What, you know, why would you do that to me?
Yeah, go ahead. I know, I'm all very interesting.
I think sometimes people suffering from depression, I mean, like real, you know, they'll say things like, don't you think I want to wake up in the morning with a sense of happiness? You know, it's like they can see other people being happy, but they can't be happy, even though they may want to be.
Right.
He's like frustrated in a sense.
Frustrated how? In what sense? Why do you say that?
Just to go off of what Alana was saying, like he kind of and also Zavi, like he kind of wants something, but he like can't really achieve it. And he, yeah.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Something. The hateful siege of contraries. So that means just that. Oh, I see what you're all explaining. That the contraries, that this kind of going back and forth. The back and forth between desiring it and then simultaneously desiring and not desiring it.
Question?
I'm asking you a question. Simultaneously desiring and not desiring. Is that what you're saying?
Simultaneously wanting it and knowing there's no point in wanting it because you'll never get it.
What about this last? Yeah, and in heaven, much worse would be my state.
It would, if I feel disconnected here, how much worse would I feel over there?
I see. I'm looking a little sympathetically now. Like I think he's being a little bit self-dramatizing here. And this last line is like, because you're being very generous to him, Zavid. You know, why did you create me this way? And of course, from some point of view in the poem, he wasn't created that way, right? He rebelled, right? So there's that, right? He's the rebellious one. Jesus is the good son, and he's the rebellious one. And I was just thinking of the voice of, you know, one of the people you were talking about. And at the end, it says, in heaven, much worse would be my stake. So there, meaning I would not do well there anyway, right? Like, I'm just thinking of it's like almost like the voice of justification that you hear at the end of Wyatt's poems, you know, this this self-justifying obfuscation. So
again, it's if it would be worse over there, then I won't. I shouldn't try at all, because it's not just him saying a fact; it's also him justifying why he should never be better.
Right. We wondered about this when we read Dr. Faustus, and I don't know if we ever thought it through and completely. It's like, why can't Faustus just repent? Or why can't he?
Because he's written out a thesis why he shouldn't, and therefore he shouldn't, and therefore he won't.
Well, he has warped expectations, right?
What, in terms of what, Tom? What are his warped expectations?
Well, I'm looking at verse 125.
No, it's just we're backtracking. We're backtracking to Faustus again, but we'll come back to you in a second, Tom. Why Faustus couldn't repent? Because doctrinally he had already rejected that. That's, I think. I mean,
and he didn't really want to. He convinced himself exactly how hard it would be to do it, precisely because he didn't really want to make the effort to.
Right.
I thought it was more.
It would sort of have to shatter his identity to repent.
So that's why I'm mentioning that here, for exactly what you're saying, because I think there's a little bit of Marlowe's Faustus here. He presents himself as wanting to repent, but in the end, he's really not interested. Right. So he really needs a lot of time in therapy, because he's totally lying about himself. Right.
And I get why, though. I get why.
You're very sympathetic, right? I
get it.
Yeah. Let's find a nice home for him, and maybe he'll turn out okay in the end. Tom, what were you saying? Which line?
Oh, I was just noting in line 125. It seems to reveal his ultimate expectations, or from which his sufferings derive.
Right, the segue is very clear, right? I mean, after that, he's pretty clear about his goals. Neither here seek I nor in heaven to dwell, unless by mastering heaven supreme, nor hope to be myself less miserable, but by what I seek. I'm never going to be happy. So since I'm never going to be happy, what am I going to do?
Make everybody else miserable.
You say that to your roommate sometimes? Just because you're miserable doesn't you have to make our lives miserable, right? Why not? That might give me a little pleasure, right? Have you ever been that person to make everybody else miserable?
I think everybody has that instinct.
You can turn off your cameras and we'll vote. Just kidding. Right.
Everybody has that instinct sometimes to be awful, just because to make everyone feel awful so that you can feel better about yourself. But a good person knows how to tamper it down.
Okay. And we're all good
people
people
here. I think he's trying to make himself feel better, though. I think he's doing it because he's spiteful. If I have to suffer, why should anyone else deserve to be happy if I'm not happy?
But maybe that's a kind of pleasure.
Maybe.
He says that later on. He does say the only pleasure is by making other people miserable.
Right. So you see,
maybe he's not depressed. He's just a sadist.
So Shani, that's a very generous one. Misery loves company, right? Meaning he just doesn't want to be alone. But I bet spite, I think, is not only spite has real malice in it. I see more of the malice. You guys are very nice today. Yes, Tikva.
It reminds me of one of my favorite lines from Dr. Faustus. It is a comfort to the wretch to have company in misery.
Look at that. Right. But misery loves company has a Renaissance provenance. Who knew?
That's the root of the saying.
Right. So, right. I mean, I think also this idea, and Milton is aware of this, that people get pleasure from spite.
Well, also just that it's very comforting to know you are not the only one suffering.
That's the more generous one. The idea that there's actually pleasure in spite, pleasure in revenge. That's more complicated psychologically.
But that pleasure is usually only fleeting. It's of the moment.
Thank you, Rabbi Dorfman.
Isn't there a German term for this?
Oh, Schadenfreude. Right, Schadenfreude. What does that mean exactly, Schadenfreude?
Like when you enjoy watching other people in pain, right? Is that what it is?
I think more it has less with pain and more with failure. right? You see somebody really successful in your field and something really bad happens to them and you're like, yeah, right?
It's also the fact that he blames, I mean, Adam and Eve are part of that whole system that he blames for why he's upset.
Right. Right. He goes on about how not only did God create them, but he's all these angels taking care of them. It's like God really loves them, right? It's not unhelpful to look at this from the point of view of kind of adolescent psychology.
Destroy what you can't have.
I mean, look at this here. I mean, and the all good to me becomes bane, and in heaven much worse would be my statement. Neither here nor I, nor in heaven to dwell, unless by mastering heaven supreme, nor hope I to be myself less miserable by what I seek, but others to make such as I, though thereby worse to me redound. I don't care what happens to me. For only in destroying I find ease to my relentless thoughts. That's pretty hardcore, right? That's the picture of a madman, right? An authoritarian. I mean,
if I'm going down, you're all coming down with me.
I think that's even too generous. It's not b'diavad. Oh, I'm going down. It's l'chadchila. For only in destroying I find ease to my relentless thoughts. That's what my job is, and what I get pleasure out of in life is destroying other things.
Oh, to get ease from your relentless thoughts. I mean,
so he's like the Joker.
Relentless thoughts is not something
Take me, you're being too scholarly. Tom, what was that?
I was just listening to your description, and the Joker came to mind. Joaquin Phoenix.
Right. Oh, I didn't see that.
That's a great movie.
Right.
Yeah, very nihilistic.
I heard it's very, very nihilistic. Right. Right. Whatever force it is, it's this nihilistic. I mean, Freud talks about the death drive. This seems like this might kind of be it, right? To just destroy everything.
I think it's important, the word relentless thoughts, because for people who are compulsive and, obsessive compulsive, and they really do have relentless thoughts that go over and over in their minds, and he's trying to find release for that. And he's saying the only thing that will give me ease is if I, act on them, if I destroy those that are making me miserable, that I'm so envious of.
So that's also a very generous Freudian reading, right? He really has no choice. Milton does say that Satan thought himself impaired. We looked at that line last week. You can read that in two different ways, but one way is by means of his thought, by means of himself, he impaired his thought. He thought himself impaired. He rendered himself impaired. Meaning, even in that double meaning is he responsible for it, or did God do it to him? Right. But I think it's so much more. Sorry, Dvorak, yeah.
I'm just wondering, this question keeps going through my mind. Is Satan evil, or is he is that too simple of an explanation for him?
What? Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just trying to describe him in my head, and I'm just not. I don't know where to what direction to go with it.
Would anybody want to answer Dvorak's question?
No good villain is one-dimensional.
Yeah, you're writing the Hollywood script for this? I think that's a very good answer, though, and we've seen how that plays out in the way Milton represents Satan to us. He's a complicated character.
He's sympathetic, and that's precisely why he's so scary.
Yeah, but here he's sympathetic, and we feel sympathy for him because we say you couldn't help it. It's God. Really, not only couldn't you help it, it's God's fault. God made you like this.
I think there's a part of it that's God made you like this, but there's also a part of it of how he views himself that changes what he does. And I agree with what Ilana said about relentless thoughts, but there are plenty of people who have compulsive thoughts or have intrusive thoughts, don't do murder.
Right.
So
Right. So there is that whole question of responsibility. I think this discussion is so much more interesting than asking is Milton of the Devil's Party or not? Meaning that question, the answer to it just blurs everything. It either makes Satan is into what you're resisting, Dvorak, this, just evil character, which he's clearly not, right, in a simple way. I mean, he might be in some non-simple way. Or to say Milton really was of the Devil's Party, and then you just celebrate Satan. And in order to do that, you have to go, you can't look at these lines seriously. Because once you look at these lines seriously, the poet is not sympathizing with this perspective. He is not asking his readers to sympathize with this perspective. I mean, I guess you could say, well, Milton is really of the Devil's Party without knowing it, because he makes his Satan damaged goods. And by making Satan damaged goods, he blames God. So Milton's not really of the Devil's Party. Well, he's the devil's advocate, because the devil was screwed up from birth. But I think that's a push. I think our first reading of this is to look at a psychic portrait of an unwell being. Right? I mean, there are many different directions to go with that. I agree with that. But I think if you read for the psychology of it, it's so much more interesting than putting it into that, well, which camp was Milton in? Whenever you hear people talking about camps, they're not thinking. And they're also being really defensive. Really defensive. There are people in Israel, there are people in American Jewish community in Israel, they talk about the Torah camp. One of these people is like a friend of mine. I'm like, why is, not he was a friend of mine, because I asked him things like this too often. I said, why is the relationship between people and the Jewish people, why is it war? Why are we in different camps? Why is that the metaphor? Right? How is that a helpful metaphor to talk about different camps? It's gross, right? Really gross. It's really gross from a perspective that is like probably saying in a million other contexts, achdut, right? Oh yeah, we believe in achdut, or we believe in probably more likely achdus. We believe in that, but there's this camp, and we're in it, and you're not. We're not even that. We're not. No, we're. It's more like we're under attack and we're defending ourselves. Whatever. Sorry, but that's not a helpful way of thinking about literary criticism, about your opponent as a camp. A more helpful way of thinking about literary criticism, really a more helpful way of thinking about it, but it's very hard in a non-theological context, is to kind of think about it like Hillel and Shammai in the rabbinic tradition, is that they argue for well, I guess the rabbinic expression is for the sake of heaven, but what that means is that there's an acknowledgement that what they're revealing is both true. That whatever issue they're discussing, they're both, through their perspective, revealing an aspect of the truth. And there's a rabbinic expression, these are the words of the living God. That's what the voice from heaven ostensibly says about these disagreements. And you see, that's a way of thinking of interpretation as a community activity by which we benefit from the interpretations of others. The inevitable question that people ask is, well, these and these, but not those. We're hung up on that question now, right? Who doesn't count? Who does count and who doesn't count? That's the big, we get so hung up on that we can't really think about community reading. And it's very hard because we're all parts of different communities. Anyway, but we've just revealed through our discussion a much more nuanced reading of Satan than anything that I've seen.
Well, I think
in my experience.
Can I build for a moment on what Shani said?
Okay, but the tikva rule is in force. Go ahead.
I think that Satan, it says, I think in like book 2 or 3, that he falls because of his own pride. Mm-hmm. And I think the scariest villains, as it were, in a way, are the ones that we could be. And that part of what is so entrancing about Satan and also so frightening about Satan is that to a certain extent a person could see themselves being like Satan.
We have been that person in the dorm, which was want to ruin things for everybody else. Right. I think looking at Satan's psychology in ways that are relatable to us makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's take a deep breath. Let's just take a minute break. I'm gonna get some more coffee. We'll be like 2-minute break, 3-minute break, yeah, just to get coffee. Make it a little more. Okay, Tom, I thought you were making a Batman reference. That's why I got excited about the Joker.
No, I think it's the issue of is he coming off more authoritarian or anarchistic, right?
Maybe I don't. That's a good question. Maybe there's a relationship between the two. Who knows? So
before we continue,
yes,
I just have to defend comparing William Blake to your Machane Torah friend or whoever. I mean, I still don't think that the question of if Milton is in the devil's party without knowing it is such an earnest question on the part of the person who posed it.
Blake. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Blake has been misread by critics, I think. But let's talk about that. I'm not 100% sure what you mean. You think I'm misreading Blake, or do you think that
No, I wouldn't go that far. I'm just saying that we were talking about it's useless to break everything into camps and then start talking about your friends.
Right.
Oh
yeah, right.
And okay. I don't believe that the intent of that question about Milton.
For sure, but there is that sense among Milton critics, right? And that's really what I'm referring to, is the way in which Milton criticism broke down over the generations, people defending a certain kind of Milton and people defending another kind of Milton. And that polemic, so Milton gets pulled apart, and in the process of pulling him apart, some of the psychic complexity gets lost. That's what I meant to suggest. So since this is a little bit simpler, as Alana said, maybe we should try to read it a little bit as dialogue. I know Tikva volunteered to read some of the part of Eve. Let's give you a shot from line 205 and following, okay? You get line 205 to 225. So you already gave us the,
225?
What's that? 205, yeah.
You said two, yep. Adam, well may we labor to dress this garden, still to tend plant, herb, and flower, our pleasant task enjoined. but till more hands aid us, the work under our labor grows, luxurious by restraint.
How is more aid good? I'm going to interrupt you, Electrica. How is there going to be more aid? They're going to bring
Having
in
kids, to have sex.
Having kids was enough. See, nice to see you. Yeah, having kids, right? Okay, go ahead.
What we by day loft, overgrown, or prune, or prop, or bind, one night or two with wanton growth derides, tending to wild.
Remember, see that word wanton there? Remember how we wondered about it in book 4? So
Yeah.
you wonder about it here a little bit in the other direction. I mean, Eve is basically saying it's going to grow anyway, so don't worry so much. Go ahead, Tikva.
Thou therefore now advise, or hear what to my mind first thoughts present. Let us divide our labors. Who where choice leads thee?
Thou.
Thou? Okay, sorry. Thou where choice leads thee, or where most needs, whether to wind the woodbine round this arbor, or direct the clasping ivy where to climb, while I in yonder spring of roses intermix with myrtle, find what to redress till noon.
Okay, very nice. So what's Eve suggesting to Adam?
Split up.
Division of labor, right? She's the Henry Ford of Paradise Lost. Everybody
Let's split up so we can get more work done.
Exactly, right? Very practical, right? And that's Satan's point of view. I love also thou where choice leads thee, or where most needs, whether to wind the woodbine. It's all very poetic. Round this arbor, or direct the clasping ivy where to climb, while I in yonder spring of roses intermixed with myrtle find what to redress till noon. Go ahead, Tikva. Yeah. For a while.
For while so near each other thus all day, our task we choose, what wonder if so near looks intervene and smiles, or object
Or object new.
Object or object.
Object.
Or object new casual discourse drawn, which intermits our day's work brought to little, though begun early, and the hour of supper comes unearned.
This is funny, isn't it? No? I mean, so why does Eve say they should split up?
Because they're not productive.
Why are they not productive?
Because they're engaged in conversation.
Because it's like they're flirting too much.
Yeah.
I mean, Eve basically says, if I hang around too much, we're going to, what wonder if so near looks intervene and smiles? Or object.
People don't like office romances.
Right, they both have to go to personnel, to human resources, and sign a statement that they're not going to get involved with each other, right? And so our days brought to little, though begun early, and this hour of supper comes unearned. She really does have she has like the thing of America, the Protestant work ethic, right? Let's get to work. Let's not waste time.
No, I think it's funny that usually the man is perceived as the practical, and here the woman is all about it.
That's interesting. Although we do have a tradition in Shakespeare of wimpy men, right? Or poet, Romeo, Orlando. I don't know if Adam is in that mold, but you're right. She is being very pragmatic, and
maybe she just wants to get away a little bit, have a little quiet.
Okay, right.
Maybe she wants to look at herself, her reflection again.
Who knows what Eve really wants to do? Well, we know what she wants to do in her spare time. She wanders the garden. I guess she gets intercepted by Satan. Did anybody practice the part of Satan?
Every day.
It's not. I'm sorry, it's not Satan. It's Adam. But I gave you that one, and you took advantage of it. Does anybody want to take the role of Adam?
I could do it.
Dvorak. All right.
Wait, what line are we on?
We're on line 226.
Where are we?
226. To whom?
Dvorak, your microphone is off.
Sorry. Okay. You can hear me now, right?
We can. You're on.
Okay.
Yeah, you're on.
Amazing. Okay. Soul Eve, associate soul to me beyond. Compare above all.
Wait. Can you first read the first line, to whom mild Adam, and also slow down, okay?
Okay. I got excited.
It's understandable.
Right. So excited. To whom mild answer Adam thus returned, Soul Eve, associate soul to me beyond. Compare above all living creatures dear. Well hast thou motioned,
Hast thou motioned.
Well hast thou motioned, while thy thoughts employed, how we might best fulfill this work which here God hath assigned us, nor of me shall pass. Unpraised for nothing.
Wait. So great. I mean, you're giving us a very strong sense of the stop at the end of the line, and I think Milton wants us. He wants the stop. Obviously, it's there, but he wants us to read through. It makes a little bit better sense of the lines. So if you go back to 229, well, thy thoughts employed, how we might best fulfill the work which here God hath assigned us. Nor of me shall. I mean, you're right with Milton. To emphasize the end of the line shows the way Milton most often that the meaning will change between the end of the line when you experience the line of which that is a part, and then experiencing that word as part of the next line. But I think it has to be read a little bit more fluently.
It's called enjambment, right? Enjambed, right?
Right. So Dr. Feldman taught you this? Did you all get to take the poetry course with Dr. Feldman?
In our first year, yeah.
I wish I had taken that. I don't know the names of any of that stuff, and it's great to know it all. What is Adam's? How is Adam addressing his soulmate here?
It's better than everything else.
What?
Just compared above all living creatures.
Right. No, but I'm asking further. How does Adam understand this rhetorical situation? I know what he says. I'm asking why he says it in this way.
He says, kudos to you, right?
He just loves his wife. It just, right? Okay. I know, I mean, wait. Do we know from these lines that he already has a different plan? I mean, I think we do. I think I said, do we know from these lines here that he himself has a different plan? I mean, I think we know because just the way he's buttering her up, right? Soul Eve, associate soul to me beyond compare above all living creatures dear. Maybe I'm being too cynical. C just says he's the great. She's the greatest. No, let's go in order. Well, thy thoughts employed, praising her, how we might best fulfill the work which here God hath assigned us, nor of me shall pass unpraised. I mean, do you know from these lines that he's about to contradict her?
No.
No? What everybody else said? What do you think?
You concurred.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I read it differently. I see Adam as already, I already see that this is part of a rhetorical strategy. But let's say.
Oh, you think he's like he's preparing her for.
He's like, it's a really great idea, and you're fantastic, and you're the best. But we're not doing that, right?
It's like the compliment sandwich. You take a bad thing and put it in between two nice things.
See, it does.
It's not so bad.
It does have a literary term. It's a compliment sandwich. There you go. Right.
Yeah, that's what it's called. That's what it's called.
That's Dr. Feldman. Okay, so Dvorak, go ahead. For nothing. Oh, Dvorak is still on mute.
Sorry. Whatever, I'm not great at technology. Okay. Nothing lovelier can be found in woman than to study household good, and good workers in her husband to promote.
And good works. So wait. So what's the next praise of Eve?
She's a good housewife.
Good housewife.
She's a good housewife, and what else does she do?
She knows her place.
And
she supports.
So
encourages.
Tom and Shani, are you disagreeing or agreeing?
I think we're disagreeing. I'm in favor.
Tom said.
I say yay.
She's being a supportive wife.
She's encouraging.
I think that's what he's saying. I don't think it's nice.
I'm a love.
He's demoting her. I'm the husband. You support me.
For nothing lovelier can be found.
Being a bit passive aggressive, no?
Yeah, he is kind of passive aggressive.
Well, and good works in her husband to promote. So even let's take that as a doctrinal truth that people believe this. Here, by Adam saying it, it's a little self-interested, right? meaning he's about to say, you know, you're made for this, and this is what you're great at, and I'm about to give you my opinion, and you're going to support me, because that's what good wives do. I think Adam's being a little sneaky here, right? Go ahead, Dvorak.
Maybe I'm reading too much into this, but like,
Please never do me a favor. Never ever say that. Okay.
No, but like it's in women then to study household good. Like what like household are we talking about here? They're in Eden.
Good, right? I mean, there's
It's
also
Milton's way of giving his little opinion.
But that,
wait. It's it's Milton.
No, I think it means relationship.
It's Milton's way of giving his little opinion. Is that what does that mean? What does that mean?
It's his way of subtly dropping in that a good woman is a woman who stays home and supports her husband, that sticks by his side.
No, see, I'm reading it. I'm reading it that Milton is giving us a study in Adam, who already knows he's kind of screwed.
I think that's fair.
Right. Meaning, I just want to, I think it is, like we've been saying a lot about other things, it's a representation of this relationship. Go ahead, Dvorak.
235, right?
Yeah.
Yet not so strictly hath our Lord imposed labor as to debar us when we need refreshment,
when we need refreshment.
When we need refreshment, whether food or talk between food of the mind or the sweet intercourse of looks and smiles, for smiles and from reason flow, to brute denied and are of love the food. Love not the lowest end of human life.
Wait, so just stop there. So the pragmatics of this is Adam says to Eve, what she says, we got to work. What does he say?
It's okay to mix pleasure and business.
Chill out.
Right. Tiraga. Achi, tiraga. Right? Relax. Right? What's the hurry? So she says, he says we can eat, whether refreshment, whether food or talk between, food of the mind. Remember book 5, how eating and how angels eat, and eating gets associated with the process of digestion of eating is associated with the mind. So here Milton is kind of doubling down on that or furthering that. Or talk between, food of the mind. Talk, conversation is food of the mind. Or this sweet intercourse, even this intercourse of looks and smiles, or smiles from reason flow, to brute denied and are of love the food. How do we explain that phrase? For smiles from reason flow. I mean, first we would say that would not be our first read of things. We would associate smiling much more with feeling, wouldn't we?
So the smiling in Eden is intellectual smiling?
Okay, that's a start, yeah. But why?
Milton has been cast as reason in a very like divine, heavenly light throughout the poem. And I can't remember if it's at the beginning of book 9 or book 7, but when he says like, may all of Bacchus's worshipers come nowhere near my epic. So like it's not reason in just a mundane sense of like, I make lists of pros and cons.
Right.
It's something higher. That's why it's capitalized.
So, but given that, good. So reason for Milton, and he talks about right reason or erect reason that's, and in Areopagitica, reason that somehow is connected to the divine. What we said for Milton, reason, it seems to be, that is, Tselem Elohim for Milton is reason. But that raises my question and makes it even stronger. For smiles from reason flow. Smiles is so physical and so much attached to the body. I think, Ben is kind of expanding my question. And are to brute denied and are of love the food, love not the lowest end of human life.
I mean, it looks in line 242, it looks like like Adam is almost slacking off, like for not to irksome toil.
Oh, good. I mean, I mean that's the pragmatism of it, and we said that Adam tells Eve to chill, but I think it's just we do need to just put a footnote here and think back to Book 5, where Milton articulates that whole metaphysics where angels eat. But part of that is that he's going to see a relationship between thought and feeling. That's Eliot's terms, T.S. Eliot's terms. But here, there's this whole idea that talk as refreshment, food of the mind, this sweet intercourse, for smiles from reason flow, that there is a bringing together of those things that really, before our period, are apart in the Catholic world, and after our period are very much separated in the philosophical world. They're separate things. You smile because you feel happy. Being reasonable is something else altogether. And then he goes on as Tikva says, oh, Dvora, why don't you read it for us, yeah?
Yeah, where do you want me to read from?
These paths and bowers.
Can Professor, before you go on, can you elaborate on the continuity between reason and food and all? I'm just
remember, see, that in Book 5, angels eat, and we spoke about that not so much as this theological oddity, which it is, but we saw it as representing a certain view that Milton has about the relationship between spirit and matter. And we said that matter is in every single sphere, not only in the theological, but also the political. If you say that the physical is spiritual, you give a lot of power to the human. But we also talked about the way in which it changes it changes how you think of the relationship between parts of the human. Or maybe a better way of putting it is you see man as much more holistic, that you see reason and smiles are not separated as you might think in some other universe, a philosophical one, an older Catholic one. But for Milton, saying that spirit and body are come together and seeing that in angels eat also has ramifications for the way we interact.
Isn't it teaching in the light? In other words?
What's
Isn't
that?
it teaching in the light? In other words?
What do you mean?
Like the process of understanding the thought.
You said teaching in the
That
light?
smile. Yeah.
What
Teaching the light.
What does that mean, though? And the smile
like
is the... Go ahead.
Yeah. What did you say? The smile is?
The smile is the light?
The smile is the process that one is being through until he conquers that delight, like can understand it, and then the smile comes, sort of.
Okay. I mean, good. I mean, it's kind of related to what Ben said about Milton's conception of smiles. I get what Ben said better now. Milton's conception of smiles is attached to a divine form of reason, and it's separate from those Bacchean, Dionysian forces. And Milton, like Spencer, is also distinguishing his art from other kinds of art, right? It's throughout the whole poem he's doing that, right? And part of it is distinguishing bad art as Satan's art. And Milton has to distinguish his own art from Satan's art. But good, so I get what you guys were saying. So Adam goes on, and I'll keep on reading for you.
Yeah. Where? These paths and bowers?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. These paths and bowers doubt not, but our joined hands will keep from wilderness with ease as wide as we need walk, till younger hands ere long assist us. But if much converse, perhaps the satiate, to shorten absence I could yield.
What Adam's negotiating? What's his position here?
We stick together, we can have kids, and then they'll help.
Yeah. And what about this? But if much converse, perhaps the satiate, to short absence I could yield. It's funny. He seems to be revising his argument in mid-form, almost like a Donne poem where the guy keeps on going because you understand, even though the woman is silent, that she's not happy. I mean, it seems here that Adam is negotiating. But if much converse, perhaps thee satiate, meaning like Alana said, if you're sick of me, I could to short absence, I could yield. Meaning, if you really need to get away from me, I could take a break. So something, you see something is happening between them here, and he's already making a concession. Go ahead, Adam.
These satiate to shorten absence I could yield. For solitude sometimes is better.
It's best society.
Society. In short retirement urges sweet return, but other doubt.
Which is absence makes the heart grow fonder. That I'll go for, right?
But other doubt possesses me, lest harm befall thee severed from me. For thou knowest what hath been warned, what malicious foe, envying our happiness, and of his own despairing, seeks to work us woe and shame by sly assault. And somewhere nigh at hand watches no doubt with greedy hope to find his wish and best advantage, us asunder, hopeless to circumvent us joyed, where each to other speedy aid might lend at need. Whether his first design is to be withdraw, or our fealty
our loyalty from God, yeah.
From God, or to disturb conjugal love, than which perhaps to bliss enjoyed by us excites his envy more.
Then we just got a word wrong. Then I'm like the guy in shul who screams out correcting the Balkore. Then which perhaps no bliss enjoyed by us excites his envy more.
Okay. His envy more, or this, or worse, leaves not the faithful side that gave thee being, still shades thee and protects. The wife
Go ahead.
where danger or dishonor lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays. Who guards her with her worst enemy.
Or her the worst endures. Oh, Adam's really pouring it on here, right? What are all these strategies that he has here? How is he trying to convince her? What's that?
Is he like flattering her a little bit?
What?
Scaring her.
Buttering her up a little bit?
Flattering or scaring?
Oh.
There's a fine line.
Well, okay, well, I mean, he says there is this malicious foe envying our happiness. I mean, he's depressed, and of his own despair, he seeks to work his woe and shame by sly assault. They know that because Raphael has come down and told them all this. And somewhere nigh at hand watches, no doubt, with greedy hope to find his wish and best advantage, us asunder, helpless to circumvent us joined. What's the argument here? Why should they stay together?
Lafetach atat rovetz, you know that verse?
Okay, I don't see how it applies here.
Like the Satan is always the adversary, the fiend is always there.
Good. Okay. So, but what's the difference if they're apart or separate?
You can divide and conquer.
Okay. So now we get to the.
Can I quote Pink Floyd?
Oh, for sure.
Together we stand, divided we fall.
Oh wow, that's why Pink Floyd is not as good a band as others. Right?
Pink Floyd are the most popular in Israel anyway.
I know, that's really disappointing. Yeah. We're each to others speedy aid might lend at need, meaning we're better off together. That is a good argument, right? And then he speculates whether his first design be to withdraw our fealty from God, meaning Satan is going to break our loyalty to God, or to disturb conjugal love, get between us. Then which perhaps no bliss enjoyed by us excites his envy more, which is true. We know that from before. Or this, or worse, leave not the faithful side that gave thee being, still shades thee and protects. The wife, where danger or dishonor lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays, who guards her or with her the worst endures.
Now he's patronizing.
Yeah, why do you say that he's patronizing here?
Because he's the patron. Now he's the protector. You came from me. You should stick.
I thought it was strength in numbers. It's kind of changing a little bit here, right?
Well, he talks about strength in numbers, and then he can kind of see it's not working, and he's like, well, also this is part of your role as a wife, which I complimented you on earlier.
Right. Or maybe he's trying to say to her, you really don't have a choice. These last three lines kind of read to me like this is a word in English called a saw. A saw is like a saying that has a kind of rhythm to it. The wife where danger or dishonor lurks, safest and seemliest by her husband stays, who guards her, or with her the worst endures. It's not rhyming for sure. Milton doesn't do that kind of thing, but it's almost like Milton's Adam is saying a popular saying, right? Everybody knows this, right? That's the role of the woman, and that's the role of the man.
lurks and endures has a similar sound. It's not exactly a rhyme.
Right. I mean, I guess it's just like, again, going back to Wyatt, the last line of his poems are often proverbs. And like Wyatt finds, or the persona in Wyatt's poem, the anxious masculine persona, finds some kind of safety in a proverb which justifies his action. I remember that from back then. So here also, I think there's a sound to it almost as if Adam is finding safety in this proverb, right? And proverbial knowledge is knowledge that everybody knows. It's almost like he's saying, and of course this, right? It is interesting nonetheless to see, I think Milton is not to be identified with Adam. I realize it makes sense to do so because he had very clearly gendered ideas about marriage in his life and in his poetry, but this is nonetheless a representation of Adam and his psyche in relationship to Eve. We did say, and I don't know if it's true, we said that there was no sexual politics in Eden. Is that true? We know there's sexual politics after the fall. But is there sexual politics here? Let's read one more passage before the break. And we'll go back to you, Tikva. I'm the narrator here. To whom the virgin majesty of Eve. Well, they already had sex though, right?
So how can she be a virgin?
Right. It's like, well, you know, it's like being chaste in Comus, right? It's lavdafka. Not exactly.
He already said that the sex they had was innocent, though.
Right.
She's a virgin of thought.
To whom the virgin, to whom the virgin majesty of Eve, as one who loves, and some unkindness meets, with sweet austere composure thus replied. I mean, you see why those lines are so important to read. What do we know about Eve's response before we read it?
Not super happy with her.
She's pissed off at him. She's pissed off at him, right? How do we know that?
Some unkindness meets.
And the next line? If we were to describe this line in psychology 101, what would we describe it as?
Passive aggressive.
This is the birth of passive aggressiveness in the Garden of Eden, right? Eve's the first one.
Never understood what passive aggressive means. Okay.
I mean, it drove her to it. You know,
okay, fine. Right. Neither one of them is innocent here, right? You see, very much it's a rhetorical game that they're both playing, right? Go ahead, Tikva.
But it's nice to see how Adam, when he fails, he changes his rhetoric.
Let's see how that works. Yeah, let's see how that works. Go ahead, Tikva. Yeah.
Offspring of heaven and earth, and all earth's lord. That's such an enemy we have.
So when you find your life partner, that's how you can address him, right? It was a joke. That was a joke, right? Right. But just like he was buttering her up, I mean, you see from the 3-line intermission of the narrator, like here, I think it would really make sense to think of an actress who would play Eve. I mean, all credit to you, Tikva. But just to think of like a really passive-aggressive actress or an actor. What's an actress who can really do passive-aggressive?
Amy Poehler.
Who?
Amy Poehler.
What is she in?
No, she's not.
She's SNL. She's on a lot of SNL.
Oh, okay. I'm not holding. Yeah.
Meryl Streep.
She's very.
From The Office.
Meryl Streep.
When Meryl Streep wants to be aggressive, she can just be aggressive. Oh, she does passive-aggressive also, though, right? It's her passive-aggressive in The Devil Loves Prada. You remember that movie?
Yeah, that's like.
That's exactly what I was.
That's what I was thinking about. She can do it really well.
But
it's not fair because Meryl Streep can do anything.
Right. I mean, but her passive-aggressive in that is bordering on aggressive. It's really close to aggressive, right? Okay. Yeah. So we can imagine that, right?
Jane Mansfield seems more fitting.
Jane Mansfield. Okay, well Ben, we'll get in our time machine and join you at the break. Okay.
Or Christine.
What movie with James Mansfield in it?
Well, there are only a couple. The Girl Can't Help It.
Oh, okay.
And, she's always the same. Right?
Okay. Okay, but so she's from the 50s?
I think Christine Baranski, specifically her performance in Mamma Mia, I think that's also an option.
So you're not only giving us an actress, you're giving us a particular performance.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we got it. So Tikva, now you can now channel all those people. Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know who any of them are.
Oh, come on. Go ahead. You know who Meryl
So-
Streep is. Go ahead.
I know who Meryl Streep is, yeah.
Okay, good.
My mom's British. So- that such an enemy we have, who seeks our ruin, both by thee informed I learn, and from the parting angel overhood, as in a shady nook I stood behind, just then returned at shut of evening flowers.
True confessions. What was Eve doing?
Eavesdropping.
Right.
Before there were even Eves.
Right. She was eavesdropping, right? Not EAVES, but eavesdropping. When Raphael was telling all this stuff to Adam, on the one hand she says, or Milton, the narrator, says, she likes getting it from him, right? But on the other hand, there she is, listening in, eavesdropping, trying to get it firsthand. Okay. Go ahead, Tikva.
Right, we said it was thou, right, not who?
Yeah.
Okay. But that thou shouldst my firmness therefore doubt, to God or thee, because we have a foe may tempt it, I expected not to hear. His violence thou fearest not, being such as we, not capable of death or pain, can either not receive or can repel. His fraud is then thy fear, which plain infers thy equal fear that my firm faith and love can by his fraud be shaken or seduced. Thoughts which how found they harbor in thy breast? Adam, misthought of her to thee so dear?
Take another stab at those last two lines.
Thoughts which how found they harbor in thy breast? Adam, misthought of her to thee so dear?
Right. How could you think that about me? No, misthought is.
If I'm so dear to you.
I wanted to note the misthought, which Milton uses more than once. I mentioned it earlier in relationship, or he thought himself impaired. Say whatever. It's interesting to think of other places where Milton uses the similar term. Well, maybe it's not misthought, maybe, or just thought. Anyway, so why is Eve so pissed?
That he insinuates that she might be seduced.
How can you think that about me, right? How can you think that about me? But maybe they should be. I mean, Adam just said, right? I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to take care of you. And why does Eve say that I don't really need that?
He doesn't present a physical danger to me. I don't need protecting.
His fraud is then thy fear, which plain infers thy equal fear that my firm faith and love can by his fraud be shaken or seduced. Thoughts which how found they harbor in thy breast, Adam, this thought of her to thee so dear. How could you think that of me? I mean, what's behind Eve's argument here? I guess what I'm asking is Eve right? Is she right? Or isn't she right?
She feels aggrieved that he doesn't trust her, that he thinks that she's not as strong as he is.
So I guess I'm asking, shouldn't Adam trust her?
On one hand, if I were a reader who didn't know what was going to happen, I would be mad. But on the other hand, I know that Adam's right. And on the third hand, I don't know if Adam would have withstood Satan's.
Okay, let's just stick with the two. Let's stick with the two hands. I think
3 hands.
We're going to stick with the two. I think Tikva just raised an issue that we all know how the story ends, which is weird. So it just changes the way we read everything, meaning we know the story. But nonetheless, even though we know the story, I think we very much experience this. And Alana said this at the beginning of class, in the time of the narrative. We're very present to them in their dialogue and the simplicity of it. So really, I'm asking not so much if he's right psychologically, but what about theologically? Isn't she right from a Miltonic perspective? Meaning, Milton believes in free will. Why should it make any difference whether they're together or whether they're apart? I'm not asking that question with a great deal of conviction. I'm not sure. Meaning, when we read this, is Adam right because we know how it turns out? Or is Adam right because he's right? But if he's right, we've read so much about Milton emphasizing free will. What's the difference if Eve meets the temptation with him or without him? And isn't it true that individuals are supposed to withstand temptation? So why is it that they need to be together? Do you hear, everybody ever hears my question a little bit, right? Yeah? Yeah, Alana and then Donna, yeah.
Okay, so I don't know if this is what you or Milton mean, but people together always are stronger than people by themselves, especially in terms of temptation. And, you know, like if you just take AA as an example of creating a fellowship of not drinking and always having somebody to talk to about it and so on, that's how you keep from temptation. Also, in terms of societies that look at each other where there's no privacy, it's also to keep you from temptation. So the community or the togetherness is always something that makes you stronger against temptation.
Okay, Donna, what did you want to say?
I think that from Adam's perspective, it is clear that she's inferior because he even stated that she is severed from here. She was severed from
Severed,
here.
right.
So severed, sorry. So
again, that is Adam, though. And I mean, you're right. I mean, but
as a reader, you ask. So another thing that I wanted to say, it might be beneficial to consider it in relation to Shakespeare, The Taming of the Shrew. It's like they try to conquer them like each other with language. So that's the game here.
That's right. It is. I think that's very helpful to look at it as a game that they're both playing. Yeah, Alana was saying, right. You know, I think one reading also is to see it a little biographically. Or maybe what Alana was saying, even though Milton privileges this kind of individualism, we have to remember where that led things. And he's sitting alone in his house in London, you know, dictating the poem to his daughters, and he's pretty much in exile in his own city or in his own country. So there might be this sense now that it is better, you know, that whatever the idealism was of the early 40s for him didn't really work out that well. And maybe it's really good if we accommodate this notion of community as well, or what he said earlier about conversation. But let's take a break now, because I'm fading. Ben, how's the air conditioning in your apartment?
I don't use the AC.
Before we go on break, what did you say about he is having a misgiving about in the 40s? Just about community.
No, I don't know. In Areopagitica, well, there is this whole optimism that everybody's going to come together, and there's going to be this new commonwealth, which is going to be this Christian commonwealth, and everybody's going to be writing tracts like Milton, and there's going to be this parliament and this democracy, and it's going to be the real beginning of English Reformation, the real beginning of Reformation. So they get rid of the king, right? Milton's really invested in that, not only for political reasons, for theological reasons. He thinks, you know, he thinks messianic times are coming. I mean, in the way which he thinks of messianic times, that is, things can only be contiguous in this world. They can't be continuous, if you remember that from Areopagitica. There still will be differences, but these differences will exist in a productive relationship. So he has that idealism in the 40s, and then what happens, right? They decide to, they decide they can't keep the Commonwealth together, so they need to bring in need to bring in the General Cromwell. Then Cromwell dies, and they need to bring in his son. Right? What does that look like? That looks like kingship. And then in 1660, they bring back Charles. So again, for Milton, that's not just a political disaster. That is like a total theological political trauma. Everything that he thought would happen isn't happening, not happening. So I'm wondering, to what extent does Milton have to revise the outlook that he has from the early 40s, which is full of that idealism, full of that sense of individual autonomy. And he sees, you know, he's writing in book 7, he says, for the fit audience, though few. There are very few people who can really understand him. And maybe, as Alana says, we should stick together. I don't know, right? But I think it's ambiguous. Anyway, let's take a very needed break. Coffee is on me. We'll get back together at 6:10, okay? Great. That's different. I'll play the 4th movement of this, which is just incredible.
Well, I came upon a child of God who was walking along the road, and I asked him, tell me, where are you going? He told me, said I'm going down to Yasgur's farm, gonna join in a rock and roll band. Got to get back to the land, set my soul free. We are stardust, we are ghosts, we are building your own garden, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. Where they cannot walk beside you, I have come to lose the small, and I feel myself to be a call, something turning. Maybe it's the time of year, yes, and maybe it's the time of year, and I don't know, and the light is for burning. We are stardust, we are ghosts, we are building your own garden, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. We are stardust, we are dust, we are building your own garden, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. By the time we got to Woodstock, we were heavenly strong, and everywhere was a sound and a celebration. And I dreamed I saw the burning death flames riding shotgun in the sky, turning into butterflies above our nation. We are stardust, we are dust, we are caught in the devil's fire, and we got to get ourselves back to the garden. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you, lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you, lay your body down.
How do you relate to that?
I prefer the Joni Mitchell version.
Yeah, I know, but I just meant about the whole scene. Is it like outer space? It's like, I'm not for you. You're excused, Alana, from the conversation.
My buds from camp stopped at Woodstock. When we were going home from camp, they stopped at Woodstock and kids got off of the bus and went to Woodstock, but I didn't. I was way too young.
That's an interesting story, right? I'm just serious, like how do you as a generation relate to that? Is it like ancient history? Is it like for me when I was growing up what World War II was? Same time frame. Same time frame. In fact, you have a longer time frame. World War II seemed like another planet to me.
Time is moving faster.
Is that a metaphysical observation, a psychological observation?
No, I honestly think it's true. As technology advances and our lives move faster, time moves faster. The changes that we've seen in the last 200 years aren't comparable to the changes we saw in the last 2000.
Right. So that means it seems more immediate to you?
It seems like a long time ago.
Oh, it does seem like, oh, well, I'm just saying World War II to me seemed like a long time ago. It seemed like another world. Do you see continuities between that world and the world we live in? I guess that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. To me, it all, like, history is people doing the same thing over and over again, claiming that they're doing
but
something new.
let's go for a specificity, though. I'm talking about relationship between now and then.
Yeah, one of my favorite things actually is finding similarities between humanity, even though circumstances differ at different points of time. People are always people are always.
Okay, so but I'm just asking for the specificity. I agree with that. So people are always people, and let's say there's a psychological ground. But are there ways in which there are specific things about that time in American history, which relates to where we are now? I think now American history, well, I mean, in some sense, we're less and less American as Trump continues to be president. But in terms of American culture, we're more and more American every day, I think, because American entertainment and technology dominates the world. So that's kind of what I'm asking, the relationship between who we are today. I mean, I'm obviously older than you are, so I see continuities, or for me, and this is my perspective, and then I really want to hear yours. For me, most of American politics could be determined by whether you wanted to go to Woodstock or you would have thought of going to Woodstock, right? That's the country is basically separated along those lines in a way now. And Clinton was the Woodstock president. Trump is clearly not the Woodstock president. The Bushes were not the Woodstock presidents. I mean, obviously, and what's just weird about watching that is we've seen that style has been so imitated. It's become it's a staple of the culture in a way, that style. But there it is for the first time almost. It's weird. It's a weird moment in American history. It's pretty, cut from the 1950s to that. It's pretty extraordinary. Right. But what about you? So is it, I mean, we started with Gimme Shelter, which was about Altamont, and in the same year, you see the difference between the bands. Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, they're still nostalgic for Woodstock, right? It's a Woodstock song. And the Stones are writing about Altamont, Gimme Shelter, which is all about, like, it's already over. Whatever idealism of the 60s there was, that's done now. And kind of the Stones are a band of disillusion in a way, right? The Beatles also, the band of idealism. And the Beatles stopped recording at the end of the 70s, and the Stones' best music comes in the 70s. Tom, you look like a character in you look like you're in a Star Trek episode and you're in the transporter, but you haven't fully arrived yet. It's true, right?
Beam me up, Scotty.
I kind of missed. I came in halfway.
That's all right. You're too old. It's irrelevant. I'm talking to the young people in the room.
Oh, okay. I'm technically a millennial.
Are you? How do you get it? How do you get into that category? Ben, are you a millennial also?
81 is the cutoff. Right?
81 is the cutoff?
What else would I be? The greatest generation?
Yet to be, the jury's still out, huh?
What about you, C? Are you a millennial? Are there Israeli millennials? No.
Well, why not?
Why would you ask that?
Because it seems like being a millennial involves a certain kind of American entitlement.
Oh, come on.
What about the Israeli entitlement?
I know, I'm not as familiar with it.
Israelis are much more entitled than Americans.
Are they?
Yes, to a certain extent.
They go to the army.
Israelis are so entitled.
That's true.
Well,
no comment.
Well, that's a comment in itself, then.
Yeah, I know.
It does seem there's a growing generational wedge. You're hearing more millennials say that their future has been stolen by like the baby boomers.
Right.
I think that's the people who are like 5 years. Well,
but is this an Israeli dynamic? Do you see this generational?
Well, I think part of it is the crash of 2008, which didn't hit Israel as hard as it hit America.
Is that right?
They're entitled at all ages. It's not particular.
Shani, were you born here or you're?
I was not. No, I grew up in New York.
Shani and I were in Oakland together.
We were.
Well, it's a reunion.
But Shani, it's not true. I can see that our generation is much more entitled than the.
But there's not. But the irony is that the resources are less and less.
Yeah, the whole entitlement thing, I think, is kind of just a media trope. I mean, really? Are we that much more entitled than anybody else?
I know. I think people. Okay, yeah, maybe. I don't know. You can be the sociologists.
Everybody wants the country to finance them. You know what I'm saying?
Where do you get that idea?
Should be finance.
That's how it's in Israel.
So one of the things we mentioned is we skirt around what happens when you get into very particular issues is that the ideas that inform them get lost and you just start to argue about particular things which are maybe worth arguing about, but that's more interesting to pull back and see what informs those things.
See, are you suggesting that we've turned JFK on his head?
What?
That's not what your country can do for you.
Okay.
Who killed the Kennedys? After all, it was you and me.
Is that what Dylan said?
Stones.
No, that's in Sympathy for the Devil. Stones.
Oh. Okay, well, we just shared those. That was a radical moment in American history. Now we're going back to Milton's radicalism. Shall we continue? What's our vote now? We have, let's say, like an hour left. So we certainly don't have enough time to go through the rest of book 9. Should we continue with Adam and Eve, their pre-breakup discussion? There's a lot more to that. Should we go to the fall itself? Should we go to
let's go to the sin.
You want to go to the sin. Let's go to the good part, right? There's only one action. So you choose what line you want to start on.
I like the discussion after the sin.
Someone else should choose that.
Right. The discussion after the sin is good also, right? You don't want to miss out on that. So where should we start?
Mid-sin, actually. I meant the bit after Eve sins, but before Adam sins. That bit is interesting.
That's interesting also. So people tell me, where should we start? It's going to be like The Price is Right. Everybody has to guess a number.
613.
Pardon?
613.
613.
No one was saying anything, so I was like looking at which parts I liked, and
that was not like a Jewish thing. You were doing like 613.
No, I was at 615, and I saw that I wanted to. It was right before it was 613.
Okay, so that's where we'll start.
Is that Tariag?
That was the question, Shuki. Apparently, it was not. It was just a coincidence.
Okay.
Do you believe in coincidence, Shuki? Just kidding. So where are we then? So they're already talking to each other. So talked the spirited, sly snake and Eve, yet more amazed, unwary, thus replied. So two things we know about Eve at this point, that is she's amazed. Why is she amazed?
Because the snake can talk.
Right? Oh, a talking snake, right? So Eve is amazed by the talking snake. So that's outside of the order of God as she understands it. And she's like, oh, I didn't know they have talking snakes here, right? And unwary. Is that bad that she's unwary?
Doesn't have her guard up.
But why would she be why would she be? It makes sense that she's unwary.
Yeah. I hear
Like,
that.
oh, cool, a snake that talks, but that's not alarming. It's just cool.
Right.
She's new to like existing in general. Like, how do you know what's weird when everything is new to you?
I guess she extrapolated that she hasn't seen animals talk, right? And she's like, oh, this is new, right? Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit. Oh, so he just praised the fruit, right? One more time. Serpent, thy overpraising leaves in doubt the virtue of that fruit in thee first proved. But say, where grows the tree? From thence how far? I guess Satan says to Eve, there's a special tree and I got to show it to you. And Eve asks, okay, where is it, right? For many are the trees of God that grow in paradise, and various, yet unknown to us, in such abundance lies our choice, and leaves a greater store of fruit untouched, still hanging, incorruptible, till men grow up to their provision and more hands help to disburden nature of her birth. That last 4 lines is kind of weird. Yet unknown to us in such abundance lies our choice. It's abundant choice, as leaves a greater store of fruit untouched. Most of the stuff we won't even get to, still hanging, incorruptible. Now this till men is weird. What might the till men, I thought something at the till men and I turned out to be wrong. I thought the till men was going to be something about the fall, right? Still hanging incorruptible, till men fall. Of course, Eve is not going to say that because she doesn't know about the fall. And then what follows really makes sense in the context, till men grow up to their provision, till there are enough of us, like they had talked about before, and more hands help to disburden nature of her birth. But even in her innocence, there is that kind of poetic anticipation, this word incorruptible. And the word incorruptible, just by its very presence, suggests corruptible. To whom the wily adder, lithe and glad. My teacher, who I go back and forth with, he follows my Twitter account, which is bizarre, and I often tweet about Milton, which might also be bizarre. So we were going back and forth about something, and he said that glad or gladly is a word that gets repeated often and in interesting ways in the poem. I was not aware of that, but he was a glad. To whom the wildly adder, blithe and glad, Empress, the way is ready and not long, beyond a row of myrtles on a flat fast by a fountain, one small thicket past, of blowing myrrh and balm. If thou accept my conduct, I can bring thee thither soon. I know the way, Satan says. Sounds picturesque also, it's a nice drive. Lead then, said Eve. He leading swiftly rolled entangled, made intricate seem straight, to mischief swift. Hope elevates and joy brightens his crest. So back to Satan and back to metaphor, right? Hope elevates and joy brightens his crest, as when a wandering fire, compact of unctuous vapor, which the night condenses, and the cold environs round, kindled through agitation to a flame, which oft they say some evil spirit attends, hovering and blazing with delusive light, misleads the amazed night wandering from his way to bogs and mires and off through pond or pool. There swallowed up and lost from suck or fall. We're just reading that for the music. It's really complicated, but let's just hear it for the music. So glistered the dire snake, and into fraud led Eve, our credulous mother, to the tree of prohibition, root of all our woe, which when she saw, thus to her guide she spake. The narrator describes Eve as credulous. Is that right? What does credulous mean, first of all?
Gullible?
Gullible, right, gullible. Easily fooled, easily tricked. Does that make sense here?
I thought it meant trusting, believing.
credulous has more of a connotation of ready to believe something that you shouldn't, being gullible, as he said, right? I see again, and maybe tell me what you think. I just see incredulous a kind of another anticipation of what we know the end will be. Meaning she's not credulous, like Renat said. She's just going along, right? She's put in, you know, she's put in the directions to ways, and she's going to follow the snake. Is she credulous?
I think with hindsight, she seems credulous.
Right. Okay. But exactly. So I think, but we're not in hindsight. We're in the moment, right? So that's exactly it. And since it's not, and for us, it is in hindsight, but for her in the moment, it's kind of anticipating. It kind of, again, plays with that weird relationship we have to the story because we know it's already happened. It's a strange story because it's all about how these characters have free will, yet we know exactly how things are going to turn out already. Right? They're ostensibly not predetermined in their choice, right? They're free, sufficient to have stood, they're free to fall, though we read this whole thing already knowing what's going to happen. It's just weird.
That's kind of how epics work, isn't it? Like the story.
Right, good, but this poem, unlike the Iliad, is really based upon this idea of freedom and free choice and free will. And if you ask, well, when do Adam and Eve fall? So, well, what would you answer to that question? When does Eve fall? I'll just tell you, why am I asking the question? Other critics in the 60s and 70s, or I don't even know when, some critics said, well, you know, when Satan whispers in her ear in book 3, it's already over, right? She dreams that she eats the apple. So that's a kind of Freudian reading that in her unconscious, she's already done it. But already at that time, she's fallen. Do you agree with that reading?
You're going to argue that she has free will, then she hasn't fallen until she's actually, up until the point that she eats the fruit, she has the ability to change her mind.
Good, right. So according to the official theology of the poem, Shani's right? Up at, when does she fall? When she eats the apple, right? I mean, we can entertain that other reading, but according to sufficient to have stood, they're free to fall, and we see that ambiguity in Milton, and we saw it in Satan as well, right? Satan basically says all the time, the devil made me do it, or my unconscious made me do it, or God made me do it. And sometimes when we sympathize with him, it seems reasonable. So we understand where those readings come, where they come from. That Eve, once she dreams it, she's as good as done it. But according to the right reason theology of the poem, which Anis is right, when she eats, she falls. And I think credulous is already kind of speaking to our position as knowing how things turn out. Anyway, there's more to say about that, or to think about. Anyway, Eve's response, serpent, we might have spared our coming hither, fruitless to me, ho-ho, though fruit be here to excess, the credit of whose virtue rests with thee, wondrous indeed of cause of such effects. But if of this tree we may not taste nor touch, God so commanded and left that command, sole daughter of his voice. There's Milton adopting the Hebrew bat kol, right? But of this tree we might not taste nor touch, God so commanded, and left that command, sole daughter of his voice. The rest we live law to ourselves, our reason is our law. So what is Eve's response to Satan when they cross town and get to the tree?
God said no.
What's that?
God said no.
Right, you're wasting us. I mean, thanks very much, but you're wasting your time. I can't really, as much, it's like, I don't know if anybody of you have ever had this experience. Some friends come in from out of town, or you come in from out of town and they say they're going to take you to a really great restaurant, and you get to the restaurant and it turns out to be a non-kosher one, and you're like, I'm sorry, I can't eat here, right? That's basically what Eve is doing. It's a really great restaurant, but I'm sorry, I can't eat here. And from her response, we see really what Renat said earlier, that she's in the state of innocence still, right? To whom the tempter guilefully replied, indeed, hath God then said that of the fruit of all these garden trees ye shall not eat? Yet lords declared of all in earth or air. You can see how much fun this would be for a Milton marathon, right? You can really ham it up if you study the parts well. You have to read it first. Tikva thought we were going to do that anyway today, but you can't really do that until you've read it and really understood it, right? So what's his surprise here? What's his rhetoric here?
Are you Lord of everything, or are you not Lord?
Exactly. Exactly. Are you in charge here or not? Which one is it? To whom thus Eve, yet sinless, kind of hitting us over the head with Shani's point, right? To whom thus Eve, yet sinless, of the fruit of each tree in the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of this fair tree amidst the garden, God hath said, ye shall not eat thereof, nor shall ye touch it, lest ye die. So she gives a very rational explanation. She scarce had said, though brief, when now, more bold the tempter, with show of zeal and love to man, and indignation at his wrong, new part put on, and as to passion moved, fluctuates, disturbed, yet comely and in act raised, as of some great matter to begin. As when of old some orator renowned in Athens or free Rome, where eloquence flourished, since mute, to some great cause addressed, stood in himself collected, while each part, motion, each act, one audience, ere the tongue sometime in height began, as no delay of preface brooking through his zeal of right. So standing, moving, or to height upgrown, the tempter, all impassioned, thus began. Why is he so impassioned and zealous? Zeal gets repeated twice here. What's he feeling so self-righteous about? Or what is he acting to be? What is his act here? I mean, it does make sense to call it an act, right? Why does it make sense to call it an act?
Well, he knows that he's manipulating her.
Right.
So he's just kind of getting himself ready, like, all right, I'm about to go on stage.
Right.
She's trying to convince me that
Right.
she knows what's going on, and okay, I'll prove her wrong, and I'll get her to do exactly what I want her to do.
Okay, so why does Milton use that metaphor of staging here?
He is. He's like an actor on a stage. It's like, it's
Right.
the play that Satan wrote beforehand. He's okay, this is my script. I'm going to say this, then she's going to say that, and I'm going to say this, and then she'll probably say this. And now that she's finally said it, she said, oh, I'm going to touch it, at least you die. Well, I know that's not true, so I got her.
It's interesting because we saw in the rhetorical game between Adam and Eve wins, right? She wins that one. She does not win this one. So that, I mean, I think Renat emphasizes the extent to which Milton is using this theatrical metaphor. And he's also associated with Athens and free Rome. I'm just wondering, why does he do that? So Renat emphasizes just this formal rhetorical game. Oh, I get that part, right. And Greece and Rome? I mean, I guess, well, what is rhetoric?
The art of convincing.
Right. And there's, well, Aristotle.
But convincing by eloquence.
Yeah.
I mean,
which
well, rhetoric, you can use rhetoric that appeals to the logos or to the rational, and then there's also rhetoric that appeals to the other one, the emotion. I've forgotten the Greek name for.
Dvorak, what were you saying?
No, I was just saying it's the art of persuasion. Just saying.
Estelle?
I was just saying the opposite is pathos of logos.
Okay, these are words you learned with Professor Pearl, Dr. Feldman?
With
Shupak. Logos and?
Pathos.
Oh, right, okay, yeah. Right, I mean, but rhetoric, I mean, but you read Aristotle's, poetics. Right, I mean, okay, so he's playing a part. And there, I guess, is the rational part. I mean, there is, so now that you brought it up, is there pathos or logos here?
I think he's using ethos to say that and none of the above.
Wait, he's using ethos as well, for sure, meaning he's building himself up as a reliable speaker. There's definitely pathos because I feel like I'm writing an undergraduate essay. There's definitely pathos because she's clearly appealing to her emotions. But is there logos as well? I mean, is there a rational argument as well?
I think so.
I mean, he's doing all of those things. I mean, that's kind of what's really powerful about his approach is it's not just pathos. Let's see. And he's got this sense of self-righteous zeal. He's defending a man from the injustice that God has done to them by putting, it's like Satan is almost projecting his issue onto them, right? I want to be, or let's take that back.
Yeah, he's projecting his.
Go ahead. How see?
What you said, it just resonated. Or just what you said exactly. He tries to incite, what do you call, like, to foment their rebellion because that's how we feel.
Right, but he's fomenting their rebellion by saying, you're supposed to be lords and masters. You're not lords and masters. In the same way that, well, forget it. I'm looking to think for a parallel, which I can't entirely make between God and Satan and man. But there is this put on, this outrage that how can you be lords if there's something out of your control? And then he gets really impassioned. Now, what's going on here? Oh, sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant. What are the different kinds of idolatry in the rabbinic imagination? Is there one like this? Aren't there some trees you're not allowed? Like people worship trees.
There's a tree thing.
Yeah,
I don't
There's
know.
a tree thing, right?
There's a tree thing.
Well, yeah. What is the tree thing, right? I think we're very far from the tree thing. We don't really get it how people can look at trees as sacred objects or as objects of idolatry.
They give sustenance.
Okay.
And they somehow recreate the substance each year, unlike
Right.
tomato plants where you need to plant them.
Okay, right. I mean, and that's also biblical. It's not only rabbinic. It's in the Bible. It's in the Hebrew Bible.
The European pagan, they worship trees.
People, there are contemporary worshippers of trees.
In the Middle East, there's a strong tradition of worshiping trees.
You have to make it.
One of the trees that was worshipped.
You have to make a distinction between tree worshippers and tree huggers.
Huggers, oh, right.
Right. Sorry to interrupt you for that joke, Alana. Sorry, that was very mature of me. Right. Okay. So there we have a context in which we understand this, and that's what he's. I mean, it's also vocative, meaning he's calling out, just like the invocation, like a poet calls out to the muse. Adam and Eve at the beginning of Book 10 will call out to God. Here, Satan is calling out to this tree. Oh, sacred, wise, and wisdom-giving plant, mother of science, now I feel thy power within me clear, not only to discern things in their causes, but to trace the ways of highest agents, deemed however wise. What's the approach here? How is what Satan says to the tree, the way he addresses the tree, how is that supposed to work on Eve? What's implicit in what he says that's supposed to change the way she views the world? What can the tree do?
The fruit improved his life, and it gave him new abilities.
We're not, right, but we're not, okay, it gave him new abilities. And what are those abilities? To trace the ways of highest agents. What is that? What's the highest agent?
Angels.
Right, angels, or like in a philosophical sense, they're different agents or causes. Not only to discern things in their causes. Remember, we read Plato and Aristotle, and in both of them, the philosopher is distinguished, poet for Aristotle, is distinguished by knowing causes, by knowing why and how things work. And that's what Satan is saying here, getting both the Aristotelian and the angelic thing here. That is, science, for Aristotle, and God is one of those highest agents. It's not only angels. It's that science. What takes priority? If we want, we talked many times about the disciplinary totem pole. Who's on top, right? We know from the beginnings, poetry. It's
the bottom.
It's philosophy, history, and poetry, right? And then that changes with early Christians, and then it's theology really that comes to the top. It pushes everything away, right? Think of Augustine, it's like throwing everything. Rhetoric gets, Augustine was trained as a rhetorician. He pushes that away. Got extremely ambivalent attitude towards poetry. So then theology is on top. What is Satan's perspective? What's on top?
Knowledge.
Science, right? I mean, and here, I probably corrected people when we were reading Sidney's Defense of Poetry, and Sidney talks about science. It's not what we know to be a science, but by now, when Milton is writing Paradise Lost, there is this thing called science. So it's not just knowledge in that Greek sense as science, but it's science. And this is really what, and enlightenment can really be understood as philosophy and reason taking priority again and pushing theology away, right? So later on in the 17th and 18th century, you even have archbishops of Canterbury, right? Leading theological figures having to rationalize Christianity because they realize that Christianity, the theological languages are under attack. So it's like if you can't beat them, join them, right? So theology will try to adopt philosophy, and they'll try to build a rational Christianity. And you already see enlightenment moving in. And that's Satan, and Satan really represents that. To trace the ways of highest agents deemed, however wise. Queen of this universe, do not believe those rigid threats of death. And I think here we're getting to what you guys were talking about before with Logos. Do not believe those rigid threats of death. Ye shall not die. How should ye? By the fruit, it gives you life. It gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener, look on me who have touched and tasted, yet both live. And life more perfect have attained than fate meant me by venturing higher than my lot. What's the effect of Satan's rhetoric here?
Intellectual mobility.
Intellectual mobility, right? It's like Satan is the author of every Hollywood script, right? You have to venture higher than your lot. Don't stay where you are. And what else is he appealing to here? First of all, how does he name God?
The threatener.
Well, how does he? Yeah, right. So that's different than all-powerful God. What does it suggest about God?
But he's all talk and he's just.
Right. Do you believe the rigid threats of death? You shall not die. How should you? By the fruit, it gives you life to knowledge. By the threatener, and here's like an implicit syllogism. Look on me who have touched and tasted, yet both live. If God has a syllogism, all people who eat from the tree of life, everything that eats from the tree of life dies. Well, I just ate from it, and I'm not dead. So the premise must be false. So did you follow my implicit syllogism there? Right?
It's like he's implying that God's a liar.
Can you repeat the syllogism again?
All people, anyone who partakes of the fruit of the tree of life will die. But wait, I partook of the tree of life. I'm not dead.
Either it's false or God will be the one to kill you.
I'm not dead, therefore the premise is false. And therefore God is really a threatener, merely because he doesn't follow through, right? Look at me, I'm great.
Or he'll be the one to kill you for it. And then he's a threatener, and then he threatens your life.
And in any event, he doesn't turn out as being the nicest or most benevolent God. If you were Eve's advisor, what would you say here? What would you tell her to do?
Well, it seems he's drawn attention away from the command to the object. Okay. So you kind of see this shift of like science is concerned with objects in and of themselves, right?
Okay.
Right.
But the issue is the ethical one.
All right, but Tom, you're not giving me very good advice. Eve she needs an advisor.
Correlation doesn't mean
This guy is
causation.
sleazy. Get out.
Well, what? We're not correlation. She has to take a philosophy course first.
Correlation doesn't mean causation. It's statistics. Just because he didn't die doesn't mean she won't die.
Right. I mean, maybe we need more data. Right?
They're different creatures.
We need more
He's
data.
a snake. She's a human. She's more important than he is.
We need an Excel sheet. So gather more data. So that's what you would tell her, Renat?
Yeah, I think so.
Wait a minute and see what happens to the next animal. You know?
As Abid, you're saying Eve should listen, she should apply for a fellowship, a grant. She can open a laboratory. She can get a lab. Do an experiment.
Need a guinea pig.
Right. So in the absence of having a lab available, she is in the English department after all, right? In the absence of having a lab available, what would you tell her to do?
Get away.
Yeah, let's it's the Monty Python, run away, right? We should probably get out of here, right?
Can I ask
a
question? I have a relentless thought in my brain. Satan doesn't really know, does he? Because he didn't eat from the fruit. the serpent never ate from the fruit. He just inhabited the serpent. And so he doesn't really know if she's going to do it or not, does he?
But he probably knows that God, he knows God's story, right?
Does? Like
I don't know. So, Marta, where were we?
Sorry.
No, it's fine, Alana. Where were we just discussing?
He's a threatener.
Right, yeah, so that's part of his strategy is rhetorical, to name him as the threatener, to undermine her, to undermine her faith. Really, I mean, we've read Thomas Kuhn now, so maybe a way to think about this is, and it sounds a little bit simplistic, so forgive me. It also sounds a little bit like I'm a modern Orthodox rabbi, so you'll forgive me about that also. There's the reason paradigm and the faith paradigm. Doesn't that sound like a modern Orthodox rabbi? That's why I don't like it, right? The reason paradigm and the faith paradigm. So Eve is still in the faith paradigm, right? We know that because she says when she sees this talking snake, oh, a talking snake. And she's very innocent, right? So I think what Satan is trying to do is to get her out of that paradigm. Meaning at this point, Eve should just say, you know,
Thanks, but no thanks.
well, no, I can't. It's gezerah, right? I can't. I just can't. And what Satan wants to do is involve her in this reasonable argument, which in a way is showing the priority of this reason-giving plant. He uses reason against her in order to kind of insinuate. Yeah.
He's saying instead of focusing on obeying God, he's shifting her focus from obeying God to avoiding the punishment.
One more time.
And so he's saying, like, look, the punishment isn't going to happen, and he kind of, you know.
Okay, right. No, so she undermines.
Washes away.
There's a divine narrative which has a causality built into it. If you eat from this tree, you will die, and that's it. And
what did you say? He's using reason against her.
There's reason and faith, right? Faith is God said, "I'm not doing it." Okay. You know, there's certain things, you know, this exists within rabbinic traditions, right? There's certain things you don't do if you're in exactly, right? In normative rabbinic traditions, there's certain things you don't do just because. Why? Because, right? And Milton is really, he's using that, he might not know anything about rabbinic chukim, but that idea of a gezerah, right? A decree, that's what it is. And Satan wants to, you know, it's like if you're a parent and you say, as soon as you get involved in the discussion, it's done, right? Meaning once you start to argue the point, it's finished. You cannot do this. But this, my son is 15, he's an expert at this, right? Wants to get me involved in the reasons. Why? I guess you're all idealistic about being sensitive parents, and you'll never do this and say kacha, right? I don't say kacha, but there's a version of it. Why? Because I said so, right? And that really should be, that's Eve's paradigm, and the devil gets her out of it. Let's skip to 780, where she falls.
But he's using reason. He's using his superior reason to show that there is a reason to eat and acquire reason.
Okay, and she should still would she have been better off if Adam were with her?
Not necessarily.
Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hypothetical, yeah. So 780. So saying, her rash hand, another hand, in evil hour forth reaching to the fruit she plucked, she eat. Earth felt the wound of nature, from her seat sighing, through all her works gave signs of woe, that all was lost. Back to the thicket slunk the guilty serpent and well might, for Eve, intent now wholly on her taste, naught else regarded. Such delight till then as seemed in fruit she never tasted, whether true or fancy so, through expectation high of knowledge, nor was Godhead from her thought. Greedily she engorged without restraint, and knew not eating death. Satiate at length, and heightened as with wine, jocund and boon thus to herself, she pleasingly began. What's Eve's experience of this fruit?
Intoxicating.
It's intoxicating, right? What about the way Milton describes this? Greedily she engorged without restraint.
Also, fourth, reaching to the fruit. She can't restrain her.
Right, here's a different kind of eating, right? There's the eating of the angels in book 5, and this eating. This eating is entirely physical. And greedily she engorged. What does the word engorged mean? To gorge without, and knew not eating death, satiated at length, filled up and heightened as with wine, jocund and boon. What does that mean? Happy, jovial. Thus to herself she pleasingly began.
The Bacchic worshiper that's banned from the poem.
What is she? What is she, Ben?
She's the Bacchic worshiper that Milton banned from the poem.
Okay.
What did you say?
She's a Bacchic worshiper, or she partakes of the same kind of erotic energy that is represented in book 7. And then she praises the tree. Oh, sovereign virtues, precious of all trees. And then she turns, line 811, she turns into a Newtonian. She says, oh, here, line 11, and perhaps I am secret. I'll tell you what I mean by Newtonian in a second. Meaning, perhaps I am secret. Heaven is high, high and remote to see, from thence distinct each thing on earth. So Eve is like, oh yeah, there's probably a God, but he's really not involved in the world. He's too far away from that. That's the kind of Newtonian idea of making the world as a clock and then pushing it off, doesn't really care what happens in it. But now she worries. Line 816. But to Adam, in what sort shall I appear? What is Eve thinking now? Uh-oh, right? Adam's coming back. Like
God
this
is whatever, but Adam, what am I going to do with him?
Right. Like they have tried to make movies of Paradise Lost, and the only part that would be interesting is this, right? Like, what is she thinking now? What does she want? What is her strategy? But to Adam, in what sort shall I appear? Shall I to him make known as yet my change, and give him to partake full happiness with me? Or rather not? Ooh, but keep the odds of knowledge in my power without co-partner. Ooh, what is Eve saying?
She's debating if she should share her knowledge now with him, if he should eat from the tree too or not.
All right. Well, why? What is she weighing here?
Maybe she wants to
know herself.
I got the upper hand now, right?
Yes.
She has the upper hand in the relationship. Why should she give that up? So to add what wants in female sex, the more to draw his love and render me more equal, and perhaps a thing not undesirable, sometime superior. For inferior, who is free? Maybe I can use this to my advantage. Here's Eve plotting. Eve was really innocent. Remember we looked in book 8, how innocent Eve was, right? And we kind of, we attribute a lack of innocence to her, but she's always spotless, pure. And we said there are no sexual politics in Eve before they fall. And we did see a little bit of those sexual politics here in the beginning, but here it's coming out in full force, right? Why give up the advantage? I have the advantage now. Why would I give it up? Is this like particularly sexist of Milton?
I mean, we've seen that she wasn't happy about her station to begin with. She wasn't,
right.
So she didn't think of it before, but it's natural that she would want to try to better her.
Right, she's fighting back. This may be well, but what if God, now she changes her mind, but what if God have seen and death ensue? There's a slight problem, right? What if I die? That would be a bummer, right? And then I shall be no more, and Adam wedded to another Eve. Wow, this is like Eve's science fiction twin, the Eve clone. Does God have an Eve clone? Did you see that kind of mediocre movie with this one guy who plays 2 parts in space? I see so much more junky movies than you do. It's a pretty recent movie. They're just like they're clones all over the place in this movie. I'll think of it and then you cannot see it. And Adam wedded to another Eve, like his nightmare, right? Or her nightmare. Shall live with her enjoying, I extinct. Like this is the ultimate jealousy. There's going to be a new Eve and I'm going to be dead. a death to think. Confirmed then I resolve, Adam shall share with me in bliss or woe. So dear I love him, that with him all deaths I could endure, without him live no life. So there's Eve being a real romantic. So
that's interesting because in the state of innocence before this, she kind of wanted to be separate. And now in the fallenness, she wants to be united.
Well, yeah, well, true. But I mean, she gives good reason. She doesn't want to be excluded, meaning
it's better to be with him than to not be a part of it.
Right. But also there's that jealousy, like, you know, I don't want him to be immortal. I don't want him to be immortal if I'm not going to be. I mean, I hear both of it, right? I mean, again, like Eve has the right, she has the right sentiment, but that she says the right thing, but there also seems to be maybe that ulterior motive, like, I don't want him to be immortal if I'm not. I don't want to be the dead one, right?
But also, it reminds me of Satan. Wow, Satan wants other to suffer.
Yeah, I know. Right. So then she gets all dressed up, and she's all perfumed with ambrosial smell. To him she hasted, and her face excused came prologue. Now that's also a rhetorical term. So just as Satan plays a part with Eve, Eve is now going to play a part with Adam, right? There's not a lot of authenticity in this book, right? Everybody's acting, right? And Milton with the term prologue and apology. Apology is also part of a rhetorical speech. Eve also is looked at in the same way. She's putting on a show. Hast thou not, this is a great line, hast thou not wondered at my stay? Right? Who do you want as the actress? Or we'll just read this and then we'll end. Who do you want as the actress here? Hast thou not wondered, Adam, at my stay? Have you wondered where I've been, Adam?
It looks a bit like Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, she seems like a little bit too, I don't know.
Scarlett Johansson.
Who do you like? Scarlett Johansson. Right, she could do it.
Marriage Story.
Who?
I said Scarlett Johansson in Marriage Story.
I'm sorry, one more time. Which story?
I said Scarlett Johansson in Marriage Story.
Oh, okay, you're giving us the film as well. Excellent. Okay. I did not see that. Is that good?
Yeah.
It seems like such a New York thingy. I don't know. Like Woody Allen warmed over? No? Anyway, so the same rhetoric we see. Thee I have missed, and thought it long deprived thy present. Agony of love till now not felt, nor shall be twice, for never more mean I to try what rash untried I sought, the pain of absence from thy sight. What is Eve doing here?
She's fawning.
Is she trying to?
A little stronger than fawning, no? Think of Scarlett Johansson in this role.
She's being the temptress.
She's seducing him, right? In a way, right? If Adam has, I don't think Adam would have fallen first, but Adam stands absolutely no chance against the seduction of Eve, given the psychology that we know that Adam has, which he's already proclaimed his weakness in relationship to the feminine, right? He's done. Let's see how it works out. Agony of love till now not felt, nor shall be twice, for never more mean I to try what rash untried I sought, the pain of absence from thy sight. But strange hath been the cause, and wonderful to hear. This tree is not, as we are told, a tree of danger tasted, nor to evil unknown opening the way, but of divine effect, to open eyes, that's straight from Genesis, right? And make them gods who taste, and hath been tasted such. And that's the news I have for you, Adam. I tasted it. The serpent wise, or not restrained as we, or not obeying. That's great, those three things. He's either wise, or unrestrained, or disobedient, hath eaten of the fruit, and is become not dead, right? That seems like Monty Python. And has become not dead as we are threatened, but thenceforth endued with human voice and human sense, reasoning to admiration, and with me persuasively hath so prevailed, that I have also tasted and have also found the effects to correspond. Opener mine eyes, dim erst, dilated spirits, ampler heart, and growing up to Godhead. Open eyes, dilated, open spirits, ampler heart, and growing up to Godhead, which for thee chiefly I sought, without thee can despise. For bliss as thou hast part to me is bliss, tedious unshared with thee, and odious soon. Thou therefore, again, Eve has her own persuasion, right? Here's the end of the syllogism, or the end of the logical argument. Thou therefore also taste, that equal lot may join us, equal joy is equal love. Lest thou not tasting, different degree disjoin us. And I then too late renounce deity for thee, when fate will not permit. Whoa, what argument is she making here?
If you don't come up to my level, then we can't be together.
Right. I mean, there are two things. First, I need to be with you. I can't have bliss without you. Right. That's one rhetorical approach. The other rhetorical approach is, what is this? What is the thread here? Lest thou not tasting, different degree disjoin us, and I then too late renounce deity for thee, when fate will not permit. Huh? What?
If I take the LSD, you need to take it too. Otherwise, it's no fun.
I like that as an explanation, but I don't get the ins and outs of it. But Shuki, yeah, you got to trip on this, man. And if you don't, something bad will happen, right?
I think she means that we'll just be too far apart. You won't have the knowledge that I don't think it's like. I think she's just saying you can't be with me unless you're on the same level, on the same plane.
Right. Thus Eve with countenance blithe her story told. So now Eve's a storyteller. And the story that she's telling is a dangerous one. But in her cheek distemper flushing glowed. On the other side, Adam, soon as he heard the fatal trespass done by Eve, amazed, astonied stood and blank. Suddenly, Milton the Spencer, right? Astonished stood and blank, while horror chill ran through his veins and all his joints relaxed. From his slack hand the garland wreath for Eve down dropped, and all the faded roses shed. It's like that's in the movie, right? He's holding the flowers. I brought you a bouquet of flowers. It's at his side, and now the flowers.
It like falls in slow motion.
Right, speechless he stood and pale, till thus at length first to himself he inward silence broke. So eventually he eats, and let's just look at.
Can I make a quick comment about the word he uses?
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that Adam is amazed by what Eve tells him, just like Eve was amazed by the snake talking.
Right, and right. So I said there's kind of a parallel, and there's the effect of a certain kind of poetry on Adam is devastating. Maybe what Ben said is Bacchic poetry, and he's defenseless against it. So let's just end here, just to see what how sex is represented after the fall. But here's 1011. But that false fruit far other operation first displayed, carnal desire inflaming. He on Eve began to cast lascivious eyes. So he's like Satan was in book 4. She him as wantonly repaid. Now wanton means wanton, right? In book 4, it doesn't mean wanton because it's before the fall. Here, wanton means wanton. As wantedly repaid in lust they burn, till Adam thus gan Eve to dalliance move. Eve, now I see thou art exact of taste and elegance, of sapience no small part. Since to each meaning savor we apply, and palate called judicious. I the praise yield thee, so well this day thou hast purveyed. Much pleasure we have lost, while we abstain from this delightful fruit, nor known till now true relish tasting. Again, a different kind of tasting. If such pleasure be in things to us forbidden, it might be wished for this one tree had been forbidden 10. If forbidden fruits are the best, bring the forbidden fruits on. But come, so well refreshed, now let us play, as meat is after such delicious fare. For never did thy beauty since the day I saw thee first and wedded thee, adorned with all perfections, so inflame my sense with ardor to enjoy thee, fairer now than ever bounty of this virtuous tree. Notice also enjoy thee. Now what is she to him? Enjoy thee. She's like an object to him. So said he, and forbore not glance or toy of amorous intent. Well, of amorous intent, no foreplay here, well understood of Eve, whose eye darted contagious fire. Her hand he seized, right? Sexuality is violence. And to a shady bank, thick overhead with verdant roof embowered, he led her nothing loath. Flowers were the couch, pansies and violets and asphodel and hyacinths, earth's freshest, softest lap. There, they their fill of love, and love's disport took largely of their mutual guilt, the seal, the solace of their sin. Till dewy sleep oppressed them, wearied them with amorous play. Soon as the force of that fallacious fruit that with exhilarating vapor bland about the spirits had played, and inmost powers made air, was now exhaled, and grosser sleep, bred of unkindly fumes with conscious dreams, encumbered. Now had they passed gas now for the first time. Now had left them, up they rose as from unrest, and each the other viewing soon found their eyes how opened and their minds how darkened. And what happens afterward? They just start to blame each other, right? He blames her, she blames him.
Wouldn't this whole thing be a little obscene for the time period? It just seems a bit much.
What's the part that's a bit much?
I thought all the lascivious looks and the pleasure that they're trying to go for. It seems a bit explicit. It's not explicit, but it is explicit.
It's like a 1930s movie, right? It's like there's no. It's not explicit, but somehow more seductive than movies that are made today where people are fully naked because of the suggestion about it.
Yes.
Right. Well, but think about it in terms of Milton's audience. I mean, I think that's a better question, right? I don't know. I mean, you're right. There are all these Puritans around who are probably not going to appreciate this. I mean, we know in Shakespeare's time, Shakespeare does not hesitate to be as lewd as possible, right? I think of any
plays are different than religious poetry.
That is for sure, right? And especially the kind of poem that he's writing, which he's trying to justify the ways of God to man, and that's in a way what Renat is asking.
Then again,
how does that fit? So how does that representation of sexuality fit here?
We've got the Song of Songs.
But I'm not. I'm asking about this. I'm asking about Milton and his. So Milton, you're saying he has a source for that, okay? But what about Milton and his relationship to his reader? Meaning, when we misread Wanton in book 4, but now we're not misreading. Excuse me. Now we're not misreading. This really is Wanton. Why does Milton expose us to this? Let's publish Paradise Lost for a religious school in Israel. Oh, let's not. Right? What would you have to cut out of Paradise Lost for Milton in a religious school?
All of Satan.
Everything.
Right, everything, right. I mean, all the non-Jewish parts, which is everything. But even if you were to keep in the religious parts and say those were okay, there'd be a lot you'd have to cut, right? And especially this. So why is Milton titillating us so? Amorous
What makes
play.
the point of the fall?
Pardon, what's the point of the fall?
No, he makes the point of this was the fall. That before that they were innocent and it was fine, and then the second they both have partaken from the fruit, this is the first thing that happens.
So I guess I'm wondering in relationship to our discussions about how Milton relates to his reader in the past, how are we supposed to understand this?
Well, I think if you relate it back to the sex scene in book 4, was it? Might have been book 5. There he has this whole tangent about how they were innocent and devoted, unlike these promiscuous harlots of today. I may be paraphrasing.
Right.
And here he's kind of being like, see, I told you.
So again, it goes back to the sexual. There are distinctions between. I mean, there are distinctions between kinds of poetry, and there's distinctions between kinds of sexuality. And the sexuality of book 4 is what's licensed by the poem, and so part of the sexuality in book 9. This is what happens after the fall. And if you're titillated by it, oh, go ahead, Tom.
No, I was just going to piggyback and say Eden has become Woodstock.
Right, in a way, this is Woodstock. Right. Well, that's not how people experience Woodstock. Woodstock was awesome, but now we know, right? We know what Woodstock was, right?
Cue the Stones. Their song would kick in right now.
Exactly, right?
So the sexuality in book 4 is aligned with the poem, and in book 9.
But I'm just saying, like, you know, I'll put it differently. I mean, the more obvious way to put it, it's innocent, and here it's post-fall. And I'm saying, like, if you want to pull back a little bit from the poem and think about just how it's working, it's just another way of saying the same thing, that Milton as poet seems to advocate what he's saying in book 4, that kind of love. And this is a kind of love that he does not advocate. I mean, we also have to keep in mind that Milton is innovative in celebrating any kind of sexual love, right? Meaning the hell-wedded love of book 4 is not without sexuality. There is sexuality there. And that goes in line with, the reasoning and smiles and the metaphysics of angels eating. These things, they come together. Sexuality is not bad. The angels have sex. Some sex is bad. Some art is bad. Amorous play is bad.
But isn't the chaste love like not an option for us mere mortals because we're after the fall?
Well, what does he mean by chaste love?
Whatever was going on in
No, can chaste love mean having? Can chaste love meaning having sex?
Well, yeah.
Do you have to have it? Do you have to have it like through the holes in sheets?
No, but that's his whole description in book 4. Is they're actually making love, but it's chaste because it's innocent, right? But isn't that beyond any capability of us? Because we're all after the fall.
Good question, right? Well, I mean, what could Milton say?
Well, he was pretty liberal on divorce, no?
Well, because he had 3 wives, so.
I think we discussed this, and we can look at it from the cynical 3 wives perspective. We can also, as I think we mentioned, look at it from the perspective of Milton really thinking of relationships, however gendered, meaning he always looks at relationships from the point of view of the masculine, but as relationships being depending upon individuation. Divorce, I think, as we said, if you believe in divorce, you actually have a better conception of marriage. Marriage is strengthened through the idea of divorce, right? Because if you have a bad marriage, you break it to have a different marriage. And marriage is based upon the idea that you get along with each other, right? And I think Milton's sexuality is based upon that reciprocity as well, I guess. I mean, it gets so weird with the sexuality because Adam even complains in book 8, God, you shouldn't have made me like this because, I'm going to be overpowered by Eve, and look what happens. He is. It's weird, right?
Isn't it also kind of challenging how the concept of being different types of love? And so this is a more sexualized or sexually charged love as opposed to a love that's more emotional or intellectual.
Right. Well, right, but
this they had before.
Right, but this love. But see, again, you're getting into that dualism. This love, and Milton doesn't hesitate. He keeps on saying they're engorging, they're engrossed. It's all physical, right? And Milton believes that just like Milton believes that the physical does not have to be so degraded. When Satan goes into the snake, he's like, oh, I'm bumming out. I don't want to be a snake. But on the other hand, Raphael goes down and he, takes the form of whatever he takes. He becomes material. And because for him, that continuity of materiality is not so bad, but the only place Satan goes or wants to go is down. And this kind of making love is just the purely material. For Milton, I think sexuality as he represents it is part of the way in which you move up that physical scale. And you don't move up away from it, you move up away through it. Surely that makes sense to, people who believe in modern love, right? Right, I mean, we would use different categories and they might not be theological, but we could certainly make a distinction between sexuality, which is based purely on lust, and a sexuality that's based upon love.
So maybe these are two different representations. Like before the fall, what we would have accepted if we had that ability before the fall, and now we see it, we perceive it as something else. So the language is shifting itself for us, for the reader, not necessarily for.
Right, I think it is redirected, and maybe that what happens in book 4 is left as some kind of. I don't think that the fall erases that entirely. Maybe it's left as some kind of aspiration or possibility.
Interesting that it's that a part of I feel like this is a very big part of Milton's midrash that he's constructing is the connection of sex to the fall.
The connection, okay, because in the Bible, sex is really not. I mean, it's mentioned, but it's not.
Sex is in the Bible. It's just not with Adam and Eve in the Bible.
Well, they're nakedness.
They're naked and they know each other. Right.
They know that they are naked, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
so Milton gives.
But knowing
us,
each other comes after they leave the garden.
That's very interesting. Right. So Milton gives us. He fills in the blanks of the sexuality, both before and after.
Right. Which means he's showing the aspect. He's claiming that the aspect of knowledge, right, the evil side of knowledge, kind of, is sex, which is interesting.
Okay, well, it's attached to a certain kind of physicality. Anyway, it's very late. So we got up to the fall. I'll write you a long email. Or I'll write you an email. We'll continue. I guess the question we'll ask for next time is how do Adam and Eve get out of this mess? Once they're in this mess, how do they get out of it? That's really another midrash that Milton, or set of narratives that Milton is adding. How do they get out of the recrimination? You see, so much of what happens here is this psychological drama. So, and they start off not doing so well with each other, right? They're already, he's a jerk and she's being, passive aggressive. So now that they've fallen, things are really bad. So how do they get out of it? Anything else before we go? I know it's late. C is on the move.
Oh my God.
On the move. Anything else? We're too tired now. Any just general questions about anything, but not. I mean, we're just lowering the flames on our brain. Anything else about?
I have a question about the rhetoric that was being used before.
Yeah.
Is it? Maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I remember that there's somewhere in Plato, I know that's really vague, with Socrates doing a lot of rhetorical arguments and how that was the right way to argue. Are those techniques also used here? I don't remember it well enough in order to reference it really.
So with Plato, or really with Aristotle, begins the distinction between kinds of rhetoric. For Plato, rhetoric in general is bad. It's like poetry. Rhetoric and poetry get put in the same category. Aristotle writes the poetics, by which he saves poetry, and he also writes the rhetoric, by which he saves rhetoric. So yeah, there's definitely. I mean, it's interesting also that when Satan becomes this rhetorician, he becomes a rhetorician like those of Greek and Rome, of Athens and Rome. Right? I would like to, and maybe I'll write you this. I would like to talk to you individually. I mean, I'm not going to force you to have a Zoom meeting with me, but let's try next week to meet, just so we can talk a little bit about where you're holding in the semester, your project, if I can help with the project. So I'll write you an email about when I'm available. You can let me know when you're available. And we'll talk about end of semester stuff. Okay? Okay, very good. Have a good night, guys. You worked very hard.
Thank you too.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Well, okay. Take care. Bye.
Good night.
Bye.